Chapter 94. Sword thrust in the water. Raoul, on betaking himself to the Guiche, found him conversing with De Wardes and Manicamp. De Wardes, since the affair of the barricade, had treated Raoul as a stranger. They behaved as if they were not acquainted. As Raoul entered, de Guiche walked up to him, and Raoul, as he grasped his friend's hand, glanced rapidly at his two companions, hoping to be able to read on their faces what was passing in their minds. De Wardes was cold and impenetrable. Manicamp seemed absorbed in the contemplation of some trimming to his dress. De Guiche led Raoul to an adjoining cabinet and made him sit down, saying, "How well you look." "That is singular," replied Raoul, "for I am far from being in good spirits." "It is your case. Then, Raoul, as it is my own, our love affairs do not progress." "So much the better. Count, as far as you are concerned, the worst news will be good news. In that case, do not distress yourself, for not only am I very unhappy, but, what is more, I see others about me who are happy." "Really, I do not understand you," replied Raoul. "Explain yourself." "You will soon learn. I have tried, but in vain, to overcome the feeling you saw dawn in me, increase and take entire possession of me. I have summoned all your advice and my own strength to my aid. I have well weighed the unfortunate affair in which I have embarked. I have sounded its depths. That it is an abyss, I am aware, but it matters little, for I shall pursue my own course." "This is madness. De Guiche, you cannot advance another step without risking your own ruin today, perhaps your life tomorrow. Whatever may happen, I have done with reflections. Listen. And you hope to succeed. You believe that Madame will love you." "Raoul, I believe nothing. I hope, because hope exists in man, and never abandons him till death. But, admitting that you obtain the happiness you covet, even then, you are more certainly lost than if you had failed in obtaining it. I beseech you, Raoul, not to interrupt me any more. You could never convince me, for I tell you beforehand, I do not wish to be convinced. I have gone so far I cannot recede. I have suffered so much. Death itself would be a boon. I no longer love to madness. Raoul, I am being engulfed by a whirlpool of jealousy." Raoul struck his hands together with an expression resembling anger. "Well," said he, "well, oil matters little. This is what I claim from you, my friend, my almost brother. During the last 3 days, Madame has been living in a perfect intoxication of gaiety. On the first day, I dared not look at her. I hated her for not being as unhappy as myself. The next day I could not bear her out of my sight. And she, Raoul, at least I thought I remarked it, she looked at me, if not with pity, at least with gentleness. But between her looks and mine, a shadow intervened. Another's smile invited hers. Beside her horse another's always gallops, which is not mine. In her ear another's caressing voice, not mine, unceasingly vibrates. Raoul, for 3 days past my brain has been on fire. Flame, not blood, courses through my veins. That shadow must be driven away. That smile must be quenched. That voice must be silenced." "You wish Monsieur's death?" exclaimed Raoul. No, I am not jealous of the husband. I am jealous of the lover." "Of the lover?" said Raoul. "Have you not observed it, you who were formerly so keen-sighted? Are you jealous of the Duke of Buckingham?" "To the very death." "Again jealous? This time the affair will be easy to arrange between us. I have taken the initiative and have sent him a letter." "It was you? Then, who wrote to him?" "How do you know that?" "I know it, because he told me so. Look at this." And he handed de Guiche the letter he had received nearly at the same moment as his own. De Guiche read it eagerly and said, "He is a brave man, and more than that, a gallant man." "Most certainly the Duke is a gallant man. I need not ask if you wrote to him in a similar style. He will show you my letter when you call on him on my behalf. But that is almost out of the question." "What is?" "That I shall call on him for that purpose." "Why so?" "The Duke consults me as you do. I suppose you will give me the preference. Listen to me, Raoul, I wish you to tell His Grace, it is a very simple matter, that today, tomorrow, the following day, or any other day he may choose, I will meet him at Vincennes. Reflect, de Guiche. I thought I told you I have reflected. The Duke is a stranger here. He is on a mission which renders his person inviolable. Vincennes is close to the Bastille. The consequences concern me. But the motive for this meeting? What motive do you wish me to assign? Be perfectly easy on that score. He will not ask any. The Duke must be as sick of me as I am of him. I implore you, therefore, seek the Duke, and if it is necessary to entreat him to accept my offer, I will do so. That is useless. The Duke has already informed me that he wishes to speak to me. The Duke is now playing cards with the King. Let us both go there. I will draw him aside in the gallery. You will remain aloof. 2 words will be sufficient. That is well arranged. I will take the wards to keep me in countenance. Why not Menacamp? The wards can join us at any time. We can leave him here. Yes, that is true. He knows nothing. Positively nothing. You continue still on an unfriendly footing. Then, has he not told you anything? Nothing. I do not like the man, and, as I never liked him, the result is that I am on no worse terms with him today than I was yesterday. Let us go, then. The 4 descended the stairs. De Guiche's carriage was waiting at the door and took them to the Palais Royal. As they were going along, Raoul was engaged in devising his scheme of action, the sole depositary of 2 secrets. He did not despair concluding some arrangement between the 2 parties. He knew the influence he exercised over Buckingham and the ascendancy he had acquired over de Guiche, and affairs did not look utterly hopeless. On their arrival in the gallery, dazzling with the blaze of light, where the most beautiful and illustrious women of the court moved to and fro, like stars in their own atmosphere, Raoul could not prevent himself for a moment forgetting de Guiche in order to seek out Louise, who, amidst her companions, like a dove completely fascinated, gazed long and fixedly upon the royal circle, which glittered with jewels and gold. All its members were standing, the king alone being seated. Raoul perceived Buckingham, who was standing a few places from Monsieur, in a group of French and English, who were admiring his aristocratic carriage and the incomparable magnificence of his costume. Some of the older courtiers remembered having seen his father, but their recollections were not prejudicial to the son. Buckingham was conversing with Fouquet, who was talking with him aloud about Belle Isle. I cannot speak to him at present, said Raoul. Wait, then, and choose your opportunity, but finish everything speedily. I am on thorns. See, our deliverer approaches, said Raoul, perceiving D'Artagnan, who, magnificently dressed in his new uniform of captain of the Musketeers, had just made his entry in the gallery, and he advanced towards D'Artagnan. The Comte de la Fere has been looking for you, Chevalier, said Raoul. Yes, replied D'Artagnan, I have just left him. I thought you would have passed a portion of the evening together. As he answered Raoul, his absent looks were directed on all sides, as if seeking someone in the crowd or looking for something in the room. Suddenly his gaze became fixed, like that of an eagle on its prey. Raoul followed the direction of his glance, and noticed that de Guiche and D'Artagnan saluted each other, but he could not distinguish at whom the captain's inquiring and haughty glance was aimed. Chevalier, said Raoul, there is no one here but yourself who can render me a service. What is it, my dear Vicomte? It is simply to go and interrupt the Duke of Buckingham, to whom I wish to say 2 words, and, as the Duke is conversing with M. Fouquet, you understand that it would not do for me to throw myself into the middle of the conversation. Ah, is M. Fouquet there? Inquired D'Artagnan. Do you not see him? Yes, now I do. But do you think I have a greater right than you have? You are a more important personage. Yes, you're right. I am captain of the Musketeers. I have had the post promised me so long, and have enjoyed it for so brief a period, that I am always forgetting my dignity. You will do me this service, will you not? M. Fouquet, the Jews. Are you not on good terms with him? It is rather he who may not be on good terms with me. However, since it must be done some day or another. Stay, I think he is looking at you, or is it likely that it might be? No, no, don't deceive yourself. It is indeed me for whom this honor is intended. The opportunity is a good one. Then, do you think so? Pray go. Well, I will. De Guiche had not removed his eyes from Raoul, who made a sign to him that all was arranged. D'Artagnan walked straight up to the group and civilly saluted M. Fouquet as well as the others. Good evening, M. d'Artagnan. We were speaking of Belle-Isle, said Fouquet, with that usage of society and that perfect knowledge of a language of looks which require half a lifetime thoroughly to acquire, and which some persons, notwithstanding all their study, never attain. Of Belle-Isle in May. Ah, said D'Artagnan, it belongs to you, I believe, M. Fouquet. M. Fouquet has just told me that he had presented it to the king, said Buckingham. Do you know Belle-Isle, Chevalier? Inquired Fouquet. I have only been there once, replied D'Artagnan, with readiness and good humor. Did you remain there long? Scarcely a day. Did you see much of it while you were there? All that could be seen in a day. A great deal could be seen with observation as keen as yours, said Fouquet, at which D'Artagnan bowed. During this, Raoul made a sign to Buckingham. M. Fouquet, said Buckingham, I leave the captain with you. He is more learned than I am in bastions, scarps, and counterscarps, and I will join one of my friends who has just beckoned me. Saying this, Buckingham disengaged himself from the group and advanced towards Raoul, stopping for a moment at the table where the Queen Mother, the young queen, and the king were playing together. Now, Raoul, said de Guiche, there is, be firm and quick. Buckingham, having made some complimentary remark to Madame, continued his way towards Raoul, who advanced to meet him, while de Guiche remained in his place, though he followed him with his eyes. The maneuver was so arranged that the young men met in an open space which was left vacant, between the group of players and the gallery, where they walked, stopping now and then for the purpose of saying a few words to some of the graver courtiers who were walking there. At the moment when the two lines were about to unite, they were broken by a third. It was Monsieur who advanced toward the Duke of Buckingham. Monsieur had his most engaging smile on his red and perfumed lips. My dear Duke, said he, with the most affectionate politeness, is it really true what I have just been told? Buckingham turned round. He had not noticed Monsieur approach, but had merely heard his voice. He started in spite of his command over himself, and a slight pallor overspread his face. Monseigneur, he asked, what has been told you that surprises you so much? That which throws me into despair, and will, in truth, be a real cause of mourning for the whole court. Your Highness is very kind, for I perceive that you allude to my departure. Precisely. Guiche had overheard the conversation from where he was standing, and started in his turn. His departure, he murmured. What does he say? Philip continued with the same gracious air. I can easily conceive, Monsieur, why the King of Great Britain recalls you. We all know that King Charles II, who appreciates true gentlemen, cannot dispense with you. But it cannot be supposed we can let you go without great regret, and I beg you to receive the expression of my own. Believe me, Monseigneur, said the Duke, that if I quit the court of France, because you are recalled, but if you suppose the expression of my own wish on the subject might possibly have any influence with the king, I will gladly volunteer to entreat His Majesty Charles II to leave you with us a little while longer. I am overwhelmed, Monseigneur, by so much kindness, replied Buckingham, but I have received positive commands. My residence in France was limited. I have prolonged it at the risk of displeasing my gracious sovereign. It is only this very day that I recollected I ought to have set off 4 days ago. Indeed, said Monsieur. Yes, but, added Buckingham, raising his voice in such a manner that the princess could hear him, but I resemble that dweller in the East, who turned mad, and remained so for several days, owing to a delightful dream that he had had, but who one day awoke, if not completely cured, in some respects rational at least. The court of France has its intoxicating properties, which are not unlike this dream, my lord, but at last I wake and leave it. I shall be unable, therefore, to prolong my residence, as your highness has so kindly invited me to do. No, no, Raoul, all is useless now, said Guiche, holding both his hands toward the Duke and leading him behind a column. Forgive me, Duke, for what I wrote to you. I was mad. Give me back my letter. It is true, said the Duke. You cannot owe me a grudge any longer now. Raoul heard these words, and comprehending that his presence was now useless between the two young men, who had now only friendly words to exchange, withdrew a few paces, a movement which brought him closer to the wards, who were conversing with the Chevalier de Lorraine respecting the departure of Buckingham. A strategic retreat, said de Wardes. Why so? Because the dear Duke saves a sword for us by it. At which reply both laughed. You will not break yourself of the habit, said Raoul to de Wardes, of insulting the absent. Yesterday it was M. d'Artagnan. Today it is the Duke of Buckingham. You know very well, monsieur, returned de Wardes, that I sometimes insult those who are present. They turned round and saw D'Artagnan, who, with a smiling eye and a cheerful face, had just placed his hand on de Wardes' shoulder. Raoul stepped back to make room for the musketeer. De Wardes trembled from head to foot, turned pale, but did not move. D'Artagnan, still with the same smile, took the place which Raoul abandoned to him. Thank you, my dear Raoul, he said. M. de Wardes, I wish to talk with you. Do not leave us, Raoul. Everyone can hear what I have to say to M. de Wardes. His smile immediately faded away, and his glance became cold and sharp as a sword. I am at your orders, monsieur, said de Wardes. For a very long time, resumed D'Artagnan, I have sought an opportunity of conversing with you. Today is the first time I have found it. The place is badly chosen, I admit, but you will perhaps have the goodness to accompany me to my apartments, which are on the staircase at the end of this gallery. I follow you, monsieur, said de Wardes. Are you alone here? Said D'Artagnan. That's well, said D'Artagnan, but 2 persons are not sufficient. You will be able to find a few others, I trust. Yes, monsieur. Real friends. No doubt of it. Very well. Get a good supply. Then, do you come to Raoul. Bring M. de Guiche and the Duke of Buckingham. Chapter 95. Sword thrust in the water, concluded. D'Artagnan's apartment was not unoccupied, for the Comte de la Fere, seated in the recess of a window, awaited him. Well, said he to D'Artagnan as he saw him enter. Well, said the latter, M. de Wardes has done me the honor to pay me a visit, in company with some of his own friends, as well as of ours. In fact, behind the musketeer appeared de Wardes and Manicamp, followed by de Guiche and Buckingham, who looked surprised, not knowing what was expected of them. Raoul was accompanied by 2 or 3 gentlemen, and, as he entered, glanced round the room, and perceiving the Count, he went and placed himself by his side. D'Artagnan received his visitors with all the courtesy he was capable of. He preserved his unmoved and unconcerned look. All the persons present were men of distinction, occupying posts of honor and credit at the court. After he had apologized to each of them for any inconvenience he might have put them to, he turned towards de Wardes, who, in spite of his customary self-command, could not prevent his face betraying some surprise mingled with not a little uneasiness. Now, monsieur, said D'Artagnan, since we are no longer within the precincts of the king's palace, and since we can speak out without failing in respect to propriety, I will inform you why I have taken the liberty to request you to visit me here, and why I have invited these gentlemen to be present at the same time. My friend, the Comte de la Fere, has acquainted me with the injurious reports you are spreading about myself. You have stated that you regard me as your mortal enemy, because I was, so you affirm, that of your father. Perfectly true, monsieur. I have said so, replied de Wardes, whose pallid face became slightly tinged with color. You accuse me, therefore, of a crime or a fault, or some mean and cowardly act, have the goodness to state your charge against me in precise terms, in the presence of witnesses. Most certainly in the presence of witnesses, and you see I have selected them as being experienced in a phase of honor. You do not appreciate my delicacy, monsieur. I have accused you, it is true, but I have kept the nature of the accusation a perfect secret. I entered into no details, but have rested satisfied by expressing my hatred in the presence of those on whom a duty was almost imposed to acquaint you with it. You have not taken the discreetness I have shown into consideration, although you were interested in remaining silent. I can hardly recognize your habitual prudence in that D'Artagnan, who was quietly biting the corner of his mustache, said, I have already had the honor to beg you to state the particulars of the grievances you say you have against me. Aloud? Certainly, aloud. In that case, I will speak. Speak, monsieur, said D'Artagnan, bowing. We are all listening to you. Well, monsieur, it is not a question of a personal injury towards myself, but one towards my father. That you have already stated. Yes, but there are certain subjects which are only approached with hesitation. If that hesitation, in your case, really does exist, I entreat you to overcome it, even if it refer to a disgraceful action. Yes, in every and any case. Those who were present at this scene had, at first, looked at each other with a good deal of uneasiness. They were reassured, however, when they saw that D'Artagnan manifested no emotion whatever. De Wardes still maintained the same unbroken silence. Speak, monsieur, said the Musketeer. You see you are keeping us waiting. Listen, then. My father loved a lady of noble birth, and this lady loved my father. D'Artagnan and Athos exchanged looks. De Wardes continued. D'Artagnan found some letters which indicated a rendezvous, substituted himself, under disguise, for the person who was expected, and took advantage of the darkness. That is perfectly true, said D'Artagnan. A slight murmur was heard from those present. Yes, I was guilty of that dishonorable action. You should have added, monsieur, since you were so impartial, that at the period when the circumstance which you have just related happened, I was not 21 years of age. Such an action is not the less shameful on that account, said De Wardes, and it is quite sufficient for a gentleman to have attained the age of reason to avoid committing an act of indelicacy. A renewed murmur was heard, but this time of astonishment and almost a doubt. It was a most shameful deception, I admit, said D'Artagnan, and I have not waited for De Wardes' reproaches to reproach myself for it, and very bitterly, too. Age has, however, made me more reasonable, and above all, more upright, and this injury has been atoned for by a long and lasting regret. But I appeal to you, gentlemen. This affair took place in 1626, at a period, happily for yourselves, known to you by tradition only, at a period when love was not over-scrupulous, when consciences did not distill, as in the present day, poison and bitterness. We were young soldiers, always fighting, or being attacked, our swords always in our hands, or at least ready to be drawn from their sheaths. Death then always stared us in the face, or hardened us, and the cardinal pressed us sorely. I have repented of it, and more than that, I still repent it, De Wardes. I can well understand that, monsieur, for the action itself needed repentance, but you were not the less the cause of that lady's disgrace. She, of whom you have been speaking, covered with shame, borne down by the affront you brought upon her, fled, quitted France, and no one ever knew what became of her. Stay, said the Comte de la Fere, stretching his hand towards De Wardes, with a peculiar smile upon his face. You are mistaken. She was seen, and there are persons even now present, who, having often heard her spoken of, will easily recognize her by the description I am about to give. She was about 25 years of age, slender in form, of a pale complexion, and fair-haired. She was married in England. Married? Exclaimed De Wardes. So, you were not aware she was married? You see we are far better informed than yourself. Do you happen to know she was usually styled my lady, without the addition of any name to that description. Yes, I know that. Good heavens, murmured Buckingham. A cry escaped from the lips of all present. The young Duke passed his handkerchief across his forehead, which was covered with perspiration. A dead silence ensued among the spectators. You see, M. de Wardes, said D'Artagnan, whom this recital had impressed more and more, as his own recollection revived as Athos spoke. You see that my crime did not cause the destruction of any one soul, and that the soul in question may fairly be considered to have been altogether lost before my regret. It is, however, an act of conscience on my part. Now this matter is settled. Therefore, it remains for me to ask with the greatest humility your forgiveness for this shameless action, as most certainly I should have asked it of your father, if he was still alive, and if I had met him after my return to France, subsequent to the death of King Charles I. That is too much, M. d'Artagnan, exclaimed many voices, with animation. No, gentlemen, said the captain. And now, M. de Wardes, I hope all is finished between us, and that you will have no further occasion to speak ill of me again. Do you consider it completely settled? De Wardes bowed and muttered to himself inarticulately. I trust also, said D'Artagnan, approaching the young man closely, that you will no longer speak ill of anyone, as it seems you have the unfortunate habit of doing. For a man so puritanically conscientious as you are, who can reproach an old soldier for a youthful freak 35 years after it happened, will allow me to ask whether you advocate such excessive purity of conscience, will undertake on your side to do nothing contrary either to conscience or the principle of honor. And now, listen attentively to what I am going to say, M. de Wardes. In conclusion, take care that no tale, with which your name may be associated, reaches my ear. Monsieur, said de Wardes, it is useless threatening to no purpose. I have not yet finished, M. de Wardes, and you must listen to me still further. The circle of listeners, full of eager curiosity, drew closer. You spoke just now of the honor of a woman, and of the honor of your father. We were glad to hear you speak in that manner, for it is pleasing to think that such a sentiment of delicacy and rectitude, and which did not exist, it seems, in our minds, lives in our children, and it is delightful, too, to see a young man, at an age when men from habit become the destroyers of the honor of women, respect and defend it. De Wardes bit his lips and clenched his hands, evidently much disturbed to learn how this discourse, the commencement of which was announced in so threatening a manner, would terminate. D'Artagnan put Raoul aside, saying, Do not interrupt me, young man. And looking at De Wardes in an authoritative manner, he continued, I am now dealing with a matter which cannot be settled by means of the sword. I discuss it before men of honor, all of whom have more than once had their swords in their hands in a phase of honor. I selected them expressly. These gentlemen well know that every secret for which men fight ceases to be a secret. I again put my question to M. de Wardes. What was the subject of conversation when you offended this young man in offending his father and mother at the same time? It seems to me, returned de Wardes, that liberty of speech is allowed when it is supported by every means which a man of courage has at his disposal. Tell me what the means are by which a man of courage can sustain a slanderous expression. You fail, not only in logic, in your argument, but in religion and honor. You expose the lives of many others, without referring to your own, which seems to be full of hazard. Besides, fashions pass away, monsieur, and the fashion of dueling has passed away, without referring in any way to the edicts of His Majesty which forbid it. Therefore, in order to be consistent with your own chivalrous notions, you will at once apologize to M. de Bragelonne. You will tell him how much you regret having spoken so lightly, and that the nobility and purity of his race are inscribed, not in his heart alone, but still more in every action of his life. You will do and say this, M. de Wardes, as I, an old officer, did and said just now to your boy's mustache. And if I refuse, inquire de Wardes. In that case the result will be that which you think you will prevent, said de Wardes, laughing. The result will be that your conciliatory address will end in a violation of the king's prohibition. The result will be that I shall go to the king with whom I'm on tolerably good terms, to whom I have been happy enough to render certain services dating from a period when you were not born, and who, at my request, has just sent me an order in blank for M. Baismos de Montalzun, governor of the Bastille. And I shall say to the king, Sire, a man has in the most cowardly way insulted M. de Bragelonne by insulting his mother. I have written this man's name upon the lettre de cachet which your Majesty has been kind enough to give me, so that M. de Wardes is in the Bastille for 3 years. And D'Artagnan, drawing the order signed by the king from his pocket, held it towards de Wardes. I subscribe to it, said de Wardes, but submit, gentlemen, that a thrust of a sword through the body, as was the custom formerly, was far better than tyranny like this. No, monsieur, replied Buckingham, for the sword thrust, when received, was no indication the particular person was right or wrong. It only showed that he was more or less skillful in the use of the weapon. Monsieur, exclaimed de Wardes. Now, interrupted D'Artagnan, you are going to say something very rude, and I am rendering you a service by stopping you in time. Is that all, monsieur? Inquired de Wardes. Absolutely everything, replied D'Artagnan, and these gentlemen, as well as myself, are quite satisfied with you. In what way? Because, as we are now about to separate, I would wager that M. de Bragelonne and myself are greater enemies than ever. You are deceived, monsieur, as far as I'm concerned, returned Raoul, for I do not retain the slightest animosity in my heart against you. This last blow overwhelmed de Wardes. He cast his eyes around him like a man bewildered. D'Artagnan saluted most courteously the gentlemen who had been present at the explanation, and everyone, on leaving the room, shook hands with him, but not one hand was held out towards de Wardes. Oh, exclaimed the young man, abandoning himself to the rage which consumed him, can I not find some one on whom to wreak my vengeance? You can, monsieur, for I am here, whispered a voice full of menace in his ear. De Wardes turned round, and saw the Duke of Buckingham, who, having probably remained behind with that intention, had just approached him. You, monsieur, exclaimed de Wardes. Yes, I am no subject of the King of France. I am not going to remain on the territory, since I am about setting off for England. I have accumulated in my heart such a mess of despair and rage that I, too, like yourself, need to revenge myself upon someone. I approve M. d'Artagnan's principles profoundly, but I am not bound to apply them to you. I am an Englishman, and, in my tone, I propose to you what you propose to others to no purpose. Since you, therefore, are so terribly incensed, take me as a remedy. In 34 hours' time I shall be at Calais. Come with me. The journey will appear shorter if together than if alone. We will fight, when we get there, upon the sands which are covered by the rising tide, and which form part of the French territory during 6 hours of the day, but belong to the territory of heaven during the other 6. I accept willingly, said de Wardes. I assure you, said the Duke, that if you kill me, you will be rendering me an infinite service. I will do my utmost to make myself agreeable to you, Duke, said de Wardes. It is agreed, then, that I carry you off with me. I shall be at your commands. I needed some real danger and some mortal risk to run to tranquilize me. In that case, I think you have met with what you are looking for. Farewell, M. de Wardes. Tomorrow morning, my valet will tell you the exact hour of our departure. We can travel together like two excellent friends. I generally travel as fast as I can. Adieu. Buckingham saluted de Wardes, and returned towards the king's apartments. De Wardes, irritated beyond measure, left the Palais Royal and hurried through the streets homeward to the house where he lodged. Chapter 96. Baismos de Montalzun. After the austere lesson administered to de Wardes, Athos and D'Artagnan together descended the staircase which led to the courtyard of the Palais Royal. You perceive, said Athos to D'Artagnan, that Raoul cannot, sooner or later, avoid a duel with de Wardes, for de Wardes is as brave as he is vicious and wicked. I know such fellows well, replied D'Artagnan. I had an affair with the father. I assure you that, Although at that time I had good muscles and a sort of brute courage, I assure you that the father did me some mischief. But you should have seen how I fought it out with him. I, Athos, such encounters never take place in these times. I had a hand which could never remain at rest, a hand like quicksilver. You knew its quality, for you have seen me at work. My sword was no longer a piece of steel. It was a serpent that assumed every form and every length, seeking where it might thrust its head. In other words, where it might fix its bite. I advanced half a dozen paces, then 3, and then, body to body, I pressed my antagonist closely. Then I darted back again 10 paces. No human power could resist that ferocious ardor. Well, De Wardes, the father, with the bravery of his race, with his dogged courage, occupied a good deal of my time, and my fingers, at the end of the engagement, were, I well remember, tired enough. It is, then, as I said, resumed Athos, the sun will always be looking out for Raoul, and will end by meeting him, and Raoul can easily be found when he is sought for. Agreed, but Raoul calculates well. He bears no grudge against De Wardes. He has said so. He will wait until he is provoked, and in that case his position is a good one. The king will not be able to get out of temper about the matter. Besides, we shall know how to pacify his majesty. But why so full of these fears and anxieties? You don't easily get alarmed. I will tell you what makes me anxious. Raoul is to see the king tomorrow, when his majesty will inform him of his wishes respecting a certain marriage. Raoul, loving as he does, will get out of temper, and once in an angry mood, if he were to meet De Wardes, the shell would explode. We will prevent the explosion. Not I, said Athos, for I must return to Blois. All this gilded elegance of the court, all these intrigues, sicken me. I am no longer a young man who can make terms with the meannesses of the day. I have read in the great book many things too beautiful and too comprehensive to longer take any interest in the trifling phrases which these men whisper among themselves when they wish to deceive others. In one word, I am weary of Paris wherever and whenever you are not with me, and as I cannot have you with me always, I wish to return to Blois. How wrong you are, Athos, how you gainsay your origin and the destiny of your noble nature. Men of your stamp are created to continue, to the very last moment, in full possession of their great faculties. Look at my sword, a Spanish blade, the one I wore at Rochelle. It served me for 30 years without fail. One day in the wind it fell upon the marble floor in the Louvre and was broken. I had a hunting knife made of it, which will last 100 years yet. You, Athos, with your loyalty, your frankness, your cool courage, and your sound information, are the very man kings need to warn and direct them. Remain here. Monsieur Fouquet will not last as long as my Spanish blade. Is it possible, said Athos, smiling, that my friend, D'Artagnan, who, after having raised me to the skies, making me an object of worship, casts me down from the top of Olympus and hurls me to the ground? I have more exalted ambition, D'Artagnan. To be a minister, to be a slave, never. Am I not still greater? I am nothing. I remember having heard you occasionally call me the great Athos. I defy you, therefore, if I were minister, to continue to bestow that title upon me. No, no, I do not yield myself in this manner. We will not speak of it any more. Then, renounce everything, even the brotherly feeling which unites us. It is almost cruel what you say. D'Artagnan pressed Athos's hand warmly. No, no, renounce everything without fear. Raoul can get on without you. I am at Paris. In that case I shall return to Blois. We will take leave of each other tonight. Tomorrow at daybreak I shall be on my horse again. You cannot return to your hotel alone. Why did you not bring Grimaud with you? Grimaud takes his rest now. He goes to bed early, for my poor old servant gets easily fatigued. He came from Blois with me, and I compelled him to remain within doors. For if, in retracing the 40 leagues which separate us from Blois, he needed to draw breath even, he would die without a murmur. But I don't want to lose Grimaud. You shall have one of my musketeers to carry a torch for you. Hola, some one day, called out D'Artagnan, leaning over the gilded balustrade. The heads of 7 or 8 musketeers appeared. I wish some gentleman who is so disposed to escort the Comte de la Fere, cried D'Artagnan. I would willingly escort the Comte de la Fere, said someone, if I had not to speak to Monsieur d'Artagnan. Who is it? Said D'Artagnan, looking into the darkness. Heaven forgive me if that is not Monsieur Baisemeaux's voice. It is, Monsieur. What are you doing in the courtyard, my dear Baisemeaux? I am waiting your orders, my dear Monsieur d'Artagnan. Wretch that I am, thought D'Artagnan. True, you have been told, I suppose, that someone was to be arrested, and have come yourself, instead of sending an officer. I came because I had occasion to speak to you. You did not send to me. I leave you, D'Artagnan, said Athos, not before I have presented Monsieur Baisemeaux de Montalzon, the governor of the Bastille. Surely you must know each other, said D'Artagnan. I have an indistinct recollection of Monsieur Baisemeaux, said Athos. Perfectly, said Athos, taking leave of him with affability. Precisely so. But, my dear Baisemeaux, shall we talk now? So much the worse, said Baisemeaux with a sigh. What do you mean by so much the worse? Exclaimed D'Artagnan, laughing. I beg your pardon, I did not see it in that light. And so there are no orders, repeated Baisemeaux with a sigh. What an admirable situation yours as captain, he continued, after a pause, Captain Lieutenant of the Musketeers. Oh, it is good enough, but I don't see why you should envy me, you governor of the Bastille, the first castle in France. I am well aware of that, said Baisemeaux, in a sorrowful tone of voice. You say that like a man confessing his sins. I would willingly exchange my profits for yours. Don't speak of profits to me if you wish to save me the bitterest anguish of mind. Why do you look first on one side and then on the other, as if you were afraid of being arrested yourself? Whose business it is to arrest others. I was looking to see whether anyone could see or listen to us. It will be safer to confer more in private, if you would grant me such a favor. Baisemeaux, you seem to forget we are acquaintances of 35 years standing. Don't assume such sanctified airs. Make yourself quite comfortable. I don't eat governors of the Bastille raw. Heaven be praised. Come into the courtyard with me. It's a beautiful moonlight night. We will walk up and down arm in arm under the trees, while you tell me your pitiful tale. He drew the doleful governor into the courtyard, took him by the arm as he had said, and, in his rough, good-humoured way, cried, Out with it, rattle away, Baisemeaux, what have you got to say? It's a long story. You prefer your own lamentations. Then, my opinion is, it will be longer than ever. I'll wager you are making 50,000 francs out of your pigeons in the Bastille. Would to heaven that were the case, M. d'Artagnan. You surprise me, Baisemeaux. Just look at you, acting the anchorite. I should like to show you your face in a glass, and you would see how plump and florid-looking you are, as fat and round as a cheese, with eyes like lighted coals. And if it were not for that ugly wrinkle you try to cultivate on your forehead, you would hardly look 50 years old, and you are 60, if I am not mistaken. Oh, quite true. Of course I knew it was true as the 50,000 francs profit you make, at which remark Baisemeaux stamped on the ground. Well, well, said D'Artagnan, I will add up your accounts for you. You were captain of M. Mazarin's guards, and 12,000 francs a year would in 12 years amount to 140,000 francs. 12,000 francs. Are you mad? Cried Baisemeaux. The old miser gave me no more than 6,000, and the expenses of the post amounted to 6,500 francs. M. Colbert, who deducted the other 6,000 francs, condescended to allow me to take 50 pistoles as a gratification, so that, if it were not for my little estate at Montalzon, which brings me in 12,000 francs a year, I could not have met my engagements. Well, then, how about the 50,000 francs from the Bastille? They, I trust, you are boarded and lodged, and get your 6,000 francs salary besides. Admitted, whether the year be good or bad, there are 50 prisoners, who, on an average, bring you in 1,000 francs a year each. I don't deny it. Well, there is at once an income of 50,000 francs. You have held the post 3 years, and must have received in that time 150,000 francs. You forget one circumstance, DM D'Artagnan. What is that? That while you receive your appointment as captain from the king himself, I received mine as governor from Messrs. Tremblay and Louviere. Quite right, and Tremblay was not a man to let you have the post for nothing. No Louviere either. The result was that I gave 75,000 francs to Tremblay as his share. Very agreeable that. And to Louviere. The very same. Money down. No, that would have been impossible. The king did not wish, or rather M. Mazarin did not wish, to have the appearance of removing those two gentlemen who had sprung from the barricades. He permitted them, therefore, to make certain extravagant conditions for their retirement. What were those conditions? Tremble, 3 years' income for the goodwill. The juice, so that the 150,000 francs have passed into their hands. Precisely so. And beyond that, a sum of 150,000 francs, or 15,000 pistoles, whichever you please, in 3 payments. Exorbitant. Yes, but that is not all. What besides? In default of the fulfillment by me of any one of those conditions, those gentlemen enter upon their functions again. The king has been induced to sign that. It is monstrous, incredible. Such is the fact, however. Certainly, but he was strongly persuaded to do so by my protector. Who is he? One of your own friends, indeed, M. de Herblay. M. de Herblay. Aramis. Just so. He has been very kind towards me. Kind, to make you enter into such a bargain. Listen, I wish to leave the cardinal's service. M. de Herblay spoke on my behalf to Louviere and Tremblay. They objected. I wished to have the appointment very much, for I knew what it could be made to produce. In my distress, I confided in M. de Herblay, and he offered to become my surety for the different payments. You astound me. Aramis become your surety. Like a man of honor, he procured the signature. Tremblay and Louviere resigned their appointments. I have paid every year 25,000 francs to these two gentlemen. On the 31st of May every year, M. W. himself comes to the Bastille and brings me 5,000 pistoles to distribute between my crocodiles. You owe Aramis 150,000 francs. Then, that is the very thing which is the cause of my despair, for I only owe him 100,000. He came and settled with the vampires only 2 years. Today, however, is the 31st of May, and he has not been yet, and tomorrow, at midday, the payment falls due. If, therefore, I don't pay tomorrow, those gentlemen can, by the terms of the contract, break off the bargain. I shall be stripped of everything. I shall have worked for 3 years, and given 250,000 francs for nothing, absolutely for nothing at all, DM D'Artagnan. This is very strange, murmured D'Artagnan. You can now imagine that I may well have wrinkles on my forehead. Can you not? Yes, indeed. And you can imagine, too, that notwithstanding I may be as round as a cheese, with a complexion like an apple, and my eyes like coals on fire, I may almost be afraid that I shall not have a cheese or an apple left me to eat, and that my eyes will be left me only to weep with. It is really a very grievous affair. I have come to you, M. D'Artagnan, for you are the only man who can get me out of my trouble. In what way? You are acquainted with the Abbé de Herblay, and you know that he is a somewhat mysterious gentleman. Yes. Well, you can, perhaps, give me the address of his presbytery, for I have been to Noisy-le-Sec, and he is no longer there. I should think not, indeed. He is Bishop of Vannes. What? Vannes in Bretagne? Yes. The little man began to tear his hay, saying, How can I get to Vannes from here by midday tomorrow? I am a lost man. But listen, a bishop is not always a resident. M. de Herblay may not possibly be so far away as you fear. Pray tell me his address. In that case I am lost. I will go and throw myself at the king's feet. But, Basmos, I can hardly believe what you tell me. Besides, since the Bastille is capable of producing 50,000 francs a year, why have you not tried to screw 100,000 out of it? How can you be hard-hearted enough to laugh? Nay, you really afflict me. Come, Basmos, if you can pledge me your word of honor, do so, that you will not open your lips to anyone about what I am going to say to you. Never, never. You wish to put your hand on Aramis. Well, go and see where M. Fouquet is. Why? What connection can there be? How stupid you are. Don't you know that Vannes is in the diocese of Belle Isle, or Belle Isle in the diocese of Vannes? Belle Isle belongs to M. Fouquet, and M. Fouquet nominated M. de Herblay to that bishopric. I see. You restore me to life again. So much the better. Go and tell M. Fouquet very simply that you wish to speak to M. de Herblay. Of course, exclaimed Basmos, delightedly. But, said D'Artagnan, checking him by a severe look, your word of honor. I give you my sacred word of honor, replied the little man, about to set off running. Where are you going? To M. Fouquet's house. It is useless doing that. M. Fouquet is playing at cards with the king. All you can do is to pay M. Fouquet a visit early tomorrow morning. I will do so. Thank you. Good luck attend you, said D'Artagnan. Thank you. This is a strange affair, murmured D'Artagnan, as he slowly ascended the staircase after he had left Basmos. What possible interest can Aramis have in obliging Basmos in this manner? Well, I suppose we shall learn some day or another. Chapter 97. The King's Card Table. Fouquet was present, as D'Artagnan had said, at the King's card table. It seemed as if Buckingham's departure had shed a balm on the lacerated hearts of the previous evening. Monsieur, radiant with delight, made 1,000 affectionate signs to his mother. The Count de Guiche could not separate himself from Buckingham, and while playing, conversed with him upon the circumstance of his projected voyage. Buckingham, thoughtful and kind in his manner, like a man who has adopted a resolution, listened to the Count, and from time to time cast a look full of regret and hopeless affection at Madame. The princess, in the midst of a relation of spirits, divided her attention between the king, who was playing with her, Monsieur, who quietly joked her about her enormous winnings, and de Guiche, who exhibited an extravagant delight. Of Buckingham she took but little notice. For her, this fugitive, this exile, was now simply a remembrance, no longer a man. Light hearts are thus constituted. While they themselves continue untouched, they roughly break off with every one who may possibly interfere with their little calculations of selfish comfort. Madame had received Buckingham's smiles and attentions and sighs while he was present. But what was the good of sighing, smiling, and kneeling at a distance? Can one tell in what direction the winds in the Channel, which toss mighty vessels to and fro, carry such sighs as these? The Duke could not fail to mark this change, and his heart was cruelly hurt. Of a sensitive character, proud and susceptible of deep attachment, he cursed the day on which such a passion had entered his heart. The looks he cast, from time to time at Madame, became colder by degrees at the chilling complexion of his thoughts. He could hardly yet despair, but he was strong enough to impose silence upon the tumultuous outcries of his heart. In exact proportion, however, as Madame suspected this change of feeling, she redoubled her activity to regain the ray of light she was about to lose. Her timid and indecisive mind was displayed in brilliant flashes of wit and humor. At any cost she felt that she must be remarkable above everything and everyone, even above the king himself. And she was so, for the queens, notwithstanding their dignity, and the king, despite the respect which etiquette required, were all eclipsed by her. The queens, stately and ceremonious, were softened and could not restrain their laughter. Madame Henrietta, the queen mother, was dazzled by the brilliancy which cast distinction upon her family, thanks to the wit of the granddaughter of Henry IV. The king, jealous, as a young man and as a monarch, of the superiority of those who surrounded him, could not resist admitting himself vanquished by a petulance so thoroughly French in its nature, whose energy was more than ever increased by English humor. Like a child, he was captivated by a radiant beauty, which her wit made still more dazzling. Madame's eyes flashed like lightning. Wit and humor escaped from her scarlet lips, like persuasion from the lips of Nestor of old. The whole court, subdued by her enchanting grace, noticed for the first time that laughter could be indulged in before the greatest monarch in the world, like people who merited their appellation of the wittiest and most polished people in Europe. Madame, from that evening, achieved and enjoyed a success capable of bewildering all not born to those altitudes termed thrones, which, in spite of their elevation, are sheltered from such giddiness. From that very moment, Louis XIV acknowledged Madame as a person to be recognized. Buckingham regarded her as a coquette deserving the cruelest tortures, and de Guiche looked upon her as a divinity, the courtiers as a star whose light might someday become the focus of all favor and power. And yet Louis XIV, a few years previously, had not even condescended to offer his hand to that ugly girl for a ballet, and Buckingham had worshipped this coquette on both knees. De Guiche had once looked upon this divinity as a mere woman, and the courtiers had not dared to extol the star in her upward progress, fearful to disgust a monarch whom such a dull star had formerly displeased. Let us see what was taking place during this memorable evening at the king's card table. The young queen, although Spanish by birth, and the niece of Austria, loved the king and could not conceal her affection. And of Austria, a keen observer, like all women, an imperious, like every queen, was sensible of Madame's power and acquiesced in it immediately, a circumstance which induced the young queen to raise the siege and retire to her apartments. The king hardly paid any attention to her departure, notwithstanding the pretended symptoms of indisposition by which it was accompanied. Encouraged by the rules of etiquette, which he had begun to introduce at the court as an element of every relation of life, Louis XIV did not disturb himself. He offered his hand to Madame without looking at Monsieur his brother, and led the young princess to the door of her apartments. It was remarked that at the threshold of the door, His Majesty, freed from every restraint, or not equal to the situation, sighed very deeply. The ladies present, for nothing escapes a woman's glance, Mademoiselle Mondelais, for instance, did not fail to say to each other, "The king sighed," and Madame sighed too. This had been indeed the case. Madame had sighed very noiselessly, but with an accompaniment very far more dangerous for the king's repose. True it is that this young country girl might allege as her excuse the agitation into which the king seemed to be thrown, for Mademoiselle de la Valliere, busily engaged in closing the door, had involuntarily fixed her eyes upon the king, who, as he retired backwards, had his face towards it. The king returned to the room where the card tables were set out. He wished to speak to the different persons there, but it was easy to see that his mind was absent. He jumbled different accounts together, which was taken advantage of by some of the noblemen who had retained those habits since the time of Monsieur Mazarin, who had a poor memory, but was a good calculator. The king only recovered his attention in some degree at the moment that Monsieur Colbert, who had been narrowly observant for some minutes, approached, and, doubtless, with great respect, yet with much perseverance, whispered a counsel of some sort into the still tingling ears of the king. The king, at the suggestion, listened with renewed attention, and immediately looking around him, said, "Is Monsieur Fouquet no longer here?" "Yes, sire, I am here," replied the superintendent, till then engaged with Buckingham, and approached the king, who advanced a step towards him with a smiling yet negligent air. "Forgive me," said Louis, "if I interrupt your conversation, but I claim your attention wherever I may require your services." "I am always at the king's service," replied Fouquet. "And your cash-box too," said the king, laughing with a false smile. "My cash-box more than anything else," said Fouquet, coldly. "The fact is, I wish to give a fête at Fontainebleau, to keep open house for 15 days, and I shall require," and he stopped glancing at Colbert. Fouquet waited without showing discomposure, and the king resumed, answering Colbert's icy smile, "4,000,000 francs." 4,000,000, repeated Fouquet, bowing profoundly, and his nails, buried in his bosom, were thrust into his flesh, but the tranquil expression of his face remained unaltered. When will they be required? Sire, take your time. I mean, no, as soon as possible. A certain time will be necessary, sire. The time, monsieur, said the superintendent, with the haughtiest disdain, simply to count the money. 1,000,000 can only be drawn and weighed in a day. 4 days, then, said Colbert. My clerks, replied Fouquet, addressing himself to the king, will perform wonders on his majesty's service, and the sum shall be ready in 3 days. His domestics perceived, by the manner in which he approached his carriage, that their master was not in the best of humours. The result of their discernment was that his orders were executed with that exactitude of manoeuvre which is found on board a man-of-war commanded during a storm by an ill-tempered captain. The carriage, therefore, did not simply roll along. It flew. Fouquet had hardly time to recover himself during the drive. On his arrival, he went at once to Aramis, who had not yet retired for the night. As for Porthos, he had supped very agreeably off a roast leg of mutton, 2 pheasants, and a perfect heap of crayfish. He then directed his body to be anointed with perfumed oils, in the manner of the wrestlers of old, and when this anointment was completed, he had himself wrapped in flannels and placed in a warm bed. Aramis, as we have already said, had not retired. Seated at his ease in a velvet dressing-gown, he wrote letter after letter in a fine and hurried handwriting, a page of which contained 1/4 of a volume. The door was thrown hurriedly open, and the superintendent appeared, pale, agitated, anxious. Fouquet threw himself upon a couch, and then pointed to the door to the servant who had followed him. When the servant had left, he said, "Excellent." Aramis, who had followed every movement with his eyes, noticed that he stretched himself upon the cushions with a sort of feverish impatience. "You have lost as usual?" inquired Aramis, his pen still in his hand. "Even more than usual," replied Fouquet. "Sometimes." "What? Monsieur Fouquet a bad player?" "There is play and play, Monsieur d'Herblay." "How much have you lost?" inquired Aramis, with a slight uneasiness. Fouquet collected himself a moment, and then, without the slightest emotion, said, "The evening has cost me 4 millions," and a bitter laugh drowned the last vibration of these words. Aramis, who did not expect such an amount, dropped his pen. 4 millions, he said. "You have lost 4 millions. Impossible." "Monsieur Colbert held my cards for me," replied the superintendent, with a similar bitter laugh. "Ah, now I understand. So, a new application for funds." "Yes, and from the king's own lips. It was impossible to ruin a man with a more charming smile. What do you think of it? It is clear that your destruction is the object in view. That is your opinion. Still, besides, there is nothing in it which should astonish you, for we have foreseen it all along." "Yes, but I did not expect 4 millions. No doubt the amount is serious. But, after all, 4 millions are not quite the death of a man, especially when the man in question is Monsieur Fouquet. My dear D'Herblay, if you knew the contents of my coffers, you would be less easy. And you promised. What could I do?" "That's true. The very day I refuse, Colbert will procure the money, whence I know not, but he will procure it, and I shall be lost. There is no doubt of that. In how many days did you promise these 4 millions? "In 3 days. The king seemed exceedingly pressed. "In 3 days? When I think," resumed Fouquet, "that just now as I passed along the streets, the people cried out, 'There is the rich Monsieur Fouquet,' it is enough to turn my brain." "Stay, monsieur, the matter is not worth so much trouble," said Aramis, calmly, sprinkling some sand over the letter he had just written. "Suggest a remedy, then, for this evil without a remedy. There is only one remedy for you. Pay. But it is very uncertain whether I have the money. Everything must be exhausted. Belle-Isle is paid for, the pension has been paid, and money, since the investigation of the accounts of those who farm the revenue is scarce. Besides, admitting that I pay this time, How can I do so on another occasion? When kings have tasted money, they are like tigers who have tasted flesh. They devour everything. The day will arrive, must arrive, when I shall have to say, impossible, sire, and on that very day I am a lost man. Aramis raised his shoulders slightly, saying, a man in your position, my lord, is only lost when he wishes to be so. A man, whatever his position may be, cannot hope to struggle against a king. Nonsense. When I was young, I wrestled successfully with the Cardinal Richelieu, who was king of France, nay more, cardinal. Where are my armies, my troops, my treasures? I have not even Belle Isle. Bah! Necessity is the mother of invention, and when you think all is lost, something will be discovered which will retrieve everything. Who will discover this wonderful something? Yourself. I resign my office of inventor. Then I will. Be it so, but set to work without delay. Oh, we have time enough. You kill me, D'Herblay, with your calmness, said the superintendent, passing his handkerchief over his face. Do you not remember that I one day told you not to make yourself uneasy if you possess courage? Have you any? I believe so. Then don't make yourself uneasy. We shall see, then, in a very short time. Very well. However, permit me to tell you that, personally, I regret exceedingly that you are at present so short of money, because I was myself about to ask you for some. For yourself? How much do you want? 50,000 francs. Oh, a mere nothing. Of course one has always 50,000 francs. Why, the deuce cannot that knave Colbert be as easily satisfied as you are, and I should give myself far less trouble than I do. When do you need this sum? Tomorrow morning, but you wish to know its destination. Nay, Chevalier, I need no explanation. Tomorrow is the 1st of June. Well, I did not know we had any bond. Certainly, tomorrow we pay our last third installment. What third? Of the 150,000 francs to Baismos. Baismos? Who is he? The governor of the Bastille. That is likely enough, for you have so many affairs to attend to. However, I do not believe you have any affair in the world of greater importance than this one. Tell me, then, why we purchased this appointment. Why, in order to render him a service in the first place, and afterwards ourselves. Ourselves? You are joking. Monseigneur, the time may come when the governor of the Bastille may prove a very excellent acquaintance. I have not the good fortune to understand you, D'Herblay. Do you think so? Let us not deceive ourselves, Monseigneur. We are very much opposed to paying the Bastille a visit, added the prelate, displaying, beneath his pale lips, teeth which were still the same beautiful teeth so much admired 30 years previously by Marie Mitchin. My dear D'Herblay, the very day on which a man enters the Bastille, he is no longer protected by his past. Yes, he is, if the bonds are perfectly regular. Besides, that good fellow Baismos has not a courtier's heart. I am certain, my lord, that he will not remain ungrateful for that money, without taking into account, I repeat, that I retain the acknowledgments. Do not mix yourself up with it, Monseigneur. If there be usury, it is I who practice it, and both of us reap the advantage from it. That is all. Some intrigue, D'Herblay. I do not deny it. And Baismos an accomplice in it. Why not? There are worse accomplices than he. May I depend, then, upon the 5,000 pistoles tomorrow? Do you want them this evening? It would be better, for I wish to start early. Poor Baismos will not be able to imagine what has become of me, and must be upon thorns. You shall have the amount in an hour. Ah, D'Herblay, the interest of your 150,000 francs will never pay my 4 million for me. Why not, Monseigneur? Good night. I have business to transact with my clerks before I retire. A good night's rest, Monseigneur. D'Herblay, you wish things that are impossible. Shall I have my 50,000 francs this evening? Yes. Go to sleep. Then, in perfect safety, it is I who tell you to do so. Notwithstanding this assurance, and the tone in which it was given, Fouquet left the room shaking his head and heaving a sigh. Chapter 98. M. Baisemeaux de Montalzon's accounts. The clock of St. Paul was striking 7 as Aramis, on horseback, dressed as a simple citizen, that is to say, in colored suit, with no distinctive mark about him except a kind of hunting knife by his side, passed before the Rue du Petit Meuse, and stopped opposite the Rue des Tourelles, at the gate of the Bastille. 2 sentinels were on duty at the gate. They made no difficulty about admitting Aramis, who entered without dismounting, and they pointed out the way he was to go by a long passage with buildings on both sides. This passage led to the drawbridge, or, in other words, to the real entrance. The drawbridge was down, and the duty of the day was about being entered upon. The sentinel at the outer guardhouse stopped Aramis's further progress, asking him, in a rough tone of voice, what had brought him there. Aramis explained, with his usual politeness, that a wish to speak to M. Baisemeaux de Montalzon had occasioned his visit. The first sentinel then summoned a second sentinel, stationed within an inner lodge, who showed his face at the grating, and inspected the new arrival most attentively. Aramis reiterated the expression of his wish to see the governor, whereupon the sentinel called to an officer of lower grade, who was walking about in a tolerably spacious courtyard, and who, in turn, on being informed of his object, ran to seek one of the officers of the governor's staff. The latter, after having listened to Aramis's request, begged him to wait a moment, then went away a short distance, but returned to ask his name. "I cannot tell it you, monsieur," said Aramis. "I need only mention that I have matters of such importance to communicate to the governor that I can only rely beforehand upon one thing, that M. de Baisemeaux will be delighted to see me. Nay, more than that, when you have told him that it is the person whom he expected on the 1st of June, I am convinced he will hasten here himself." The officer could not possibly believe that a man of the governor's importance should put himself out for a person of so little importance as the citizen-looking visitor on horseback. "It happens most fortunately, monsieur," he said, "that the governor is just going out, and you can perceive his carriage with the horses already harnessed, in the courtyard yonder. There will be no occasion for him to come to meet you, as he will see you as he passes by." Aramis bowed to signify his assent. He did not wish to inspire others with too exalted an opinion of himself, and therefore waited patiently and in silence, leaning upon the saddle-bow of his horse. The sentinel at the outer guardhouse stopped Aramis's further progress, asking him, in a rough tone of voice, what had brought him there. Aramis explained, with his usual politeness, that a wish to speak to M. Baisemeaux de Montalzon had occasioned his visit. The first sentinel then summoned a second sentinel, stationed within an inner lodge, who showed his face at the grating, and inspected the new arrival most attentively. Aramis reiterated the expression of his wish to see the governor, whereupon the sentinel called to an officer of lower grade, who was walking about in a tolerably spacious courtyard and who, in turn, on being informed of his object, ran to seek one of the officers of the governor's staff. 10 minutes had hardly elapsed when the governor's carriage was observed to move. The governor appeared at the door and got into the carriage, which immediately prepared to start. The same ceremony was observed for the governor himself as with a suspected stranger. The sentinel at the lodge advanced as the carriage was about to pass under the arch, and the governor opened the carriage door, himself setting the example of obedience to orders, so that, in this way, the sentinel could convince himself that no one quitted the Bastille improperly. The carriage rolled along under the archway, but at the moment the iron gate was opened, the officer approached the carriage, which had been again stopped, and said something to the governor, who immediately put his head out of the doorway, and perceived Aramis on horseback at the end of the drawbridge. He immediately uttered almost a shout of delight, and got out, or rather darted out of his carriage, running towards Aramis, whose hands he seized, making 1,000 apologies. He almost embraced him. "What a difficult matter to enter the Bastille," said Aramis. Is it the same for those who are sent here against their wills, as for those who come of their own accord? 1,000 pardons, my lord. How delighted I am to see your grace. Hush! What are you thinking of, my dear M. Basmos? What do you suppose would be thought of a bishop in my present costume? Pray, excuse me, I had forgotten. Take this gentleman's horse to the stables, cried Basmos. No, no, said Aramis. I have 5,000 pistoles in the saddlebags. The governor's countenance became so radiant that if the prisoners had seen him, they would have imagined some prince of the blood royal had arrived. Yes, you are right. The horse shall be taken to the government house. Will you get into the carriage, my dear M. de Herblay? And it shall take us back to my house. Get into a carriage to cross a courtyard. Do you believe I am so great an invalid? No, no, we will go on foot. Basmos then offered his arm as a support, but the prelate did not accept it. They arrived in this manner at the government house, Basmos rubbing his hands and glancing at the horse from time to time, while Aramis was looking at the bleak bare walls. A tolerably handsome vestibule and a staircase of white stone led to the governor's apartments, who crossed the antechamber, the dining room, where breakfast was being prepared, opened a small side door, and closeted himself with his guests in a large cabinet, the windows of which opened obliquely upon the courtyard and the stables. Basmos installed the prelate with that all-inclusive politeness of which a good man, or a grateful man, alone possesses the secret. An armchair, a footstool, a small table beside him, on which to rest his hand. Everything was prepared by the governor himself. With his own hands, too, he placed upon the table, with much solicitude, the bag containing the gold, which one of the soldiers had brought up with the most respectful devotion. And the soldier having left the room, Basmos himself closed the door after him, drew aside one of the window curtains, and looked steadfastly at Aramis to see if the prelate required anything further. Well, my lord, he said, still standing up, of all men of their word, you still continue to be the most punctual. In matters of business, Dame de Basmos, exactitude is not a virtue only, it is a duty as well. Come, confess, dear M. de Basmos, that, notwithstanding this exactitude, you have not been without a little uneasiness. About your health, I certainly have, stammered out Basmos. I wished to come here yesterday, but I was not able, as I was too fatigued, continued Aramis. Basmos anxiously slipped another cushion behind his guest's back. But, continued Aramis, I promised myself to come and pay you a visit today, early in the morning. You are really very kind, my lord. What do you mean? Yes, you were going out. At which latter remark Basmos colored and said, It is true I was going out. Then I prevent you, said Aramis, whereupon the embarrassment of Basmos became visibly greater. I am putting you to inconvenience, he continued, fixing a keen glance upon the poor governor. If I had known that, I should not have come. How can your lordship imagine that you could ever inconvenience me? Confess you were going in search of money. No, stammered out Basmos. No, I assure you I was going to. Does the governor still intend to go to M. Fouquet? Suddenly called out the major from below. Basmos ran to the window like a madman. No, no, he exclaimed in a state of desperation. Who the deuce is speaking of M. Fouquet? Are you drunk below there? Why am I interrupted when I'm engaged on business? You were going to M. Fouquet's, said Aramis, biting his lips. To M. Fouquet, the abbé, or the superintendent. Basmos almost made up his mind to tell an untruth, but he could not summon courage to do so. To the superintendent, he said, It is true, then, that you were in want of money, since you were going to a person who gives it away. I assure you, my lord, you were afraid. My dear lord, it was the uncertainty and ignorance in which I was as to where you were to be found. You would have found the money you require at M. Fouquet's, for he is a man whose hand is always open. I swear that I should never have ventured to ask M. Fouquet for money. I only wish to ask him for your address. To ask M. Fouquet for my address, exclaimed Aramis, opening his eyes in real astonishment. That I might write to you. I understand, said Aramis, smiling, but that is not what I meant. I do not ask you what you require my address for. I only ask why you should go to M. Fouquet for it. But, my dear Baisemeaux, since you knew I was Bishop of Vannes, you had no occasion to ask M. Fouquet for my address. Well, monsieur, said Baisemeaux, completely at bay, if I have acted indiscreetly, I beg your pardon most sincerely. Very willingly, indeed. What does that mean? Inquired Aramis. That I have some one to breakfast with me, and that preparations are to be made accordingly. And you rang thrice. Really, my dear governor, I begin to think you are acting ceremoniously with me. No, indeed. Besides, the least I can do is to receive you in the best way I can. But why so? Nonsense. Nonsense. Nay, I assure you. Let us speak of other matters, said Aramis. Or rather, tell me how your affairs here are getting on. Not over well. The deuce. M. de Mazarin was not hard enough. Yes, I see. You require a government full of suspicion, like that of the old cardinal, for instance. Yes, matters went on better under him. The brother of his grey eminence made his fortune here. Believe me, my dear governor, said Aramis, drawing closer to Baisemeaux, a young king is well worth an old cardinal. Youth has its suspicions, its fits of anger, its prejudices, as old age has its hatreds, its precautions, and its fees. Have you paid your 3 years' profits to Louvière and Tremblay? Most certainly I have. So that you have nothing more to give them than the 50,000 francs I have brought with me. Nothing. Have you not saved anything, then? My lord, in giving the 50,000 francs of my own to these gentlemen, I assure you that I give them everything I gain. I told M. d'Artagnan so yesterday evening. Ah, said Aramis, whose eyes sparkled for a moment, but became immediately afterwards as unmoved as before. So you have seen my old friend D'Artagnan. How was he? Wonderfully well. And what did you say to him, M. de Baisemeaux? I told him, continued the governor, not perceiving his own thoughtlessness, I told him that I fed my prisoners too well. How many have you? Inquired Aramis, in an indifferent tone of voice. 60. Well, that is a tolerably round number. In former times, my lord, there were, during certain years, as many as 200. Still, a minimum of 60 is not to be grumbled at. Perhaps not, for, to anybody but myself, each prisoner would bring in 250 pistoles. For instance, for a prince of the blood I have 50 francs a day. Only you have no prince of the blood. At least, I suppose so, said Aramis, with a slight tremor in his voice. No, thank heaven, I mean, no, unfortunately. What do you mean by unfortunately? Because my appointment would be improved by it. So, 50 francs per day for a prince of the blood, 36 for a Miracle of France. But you have as many Miracles of France, I suppose, as you have princes of the blood. Alas, no more. It is true lieutenant generals and brigadiers pay 26 francs, and I have 2 of them. After that, come councillors of parliament, who bring me 15 francs, and I have 6 of them. I did not know, said Aramis, that councillors were so productive. Yes, but from 15 francs I sink at once to 10 francs, namely, for an ordinary judge and for an ecclesiastic. And you have 7, you say, an excellent affair. Nay, a bad one, and for this reason. How can I possibly treat these poor fellows, who are of some good, at all events, otherwise than as a councillor of parliament? Yes, you are right. I do not see 5 francs difference between them. You understand. If I have a fine fish, I pay 4 or 5 francs for it. If I get a fine fowl, it costs me 1.50 francs. I fatten a good deal of poultry. but I have to buy grain, and you cannot imagine the army of rats that infest this place. Why not get half a dozen cats to deal with them? Cats. Indeed. Yes, they eat them, but I was obliged to give up the idea because of the way in which they treated my grain. I have been obliged to have some terrier dogs set me from England to kill the rats. These dogs, unfortunately, have tremendous appetites. They eat as much as a prisoner of the Fifth Order, without taking into account the rabbits and fowls they kill. Was Aramis really listening or not? No one could have told. His downcast eyes showed the attentive man, but the restless hand betrayed the man absorbed in thought. Aramis was meditating. I was saying, continued Baisemeaux, that good-sized fowl cost me 1.50 francs, and that a fine fish cost me 4 or 5 francs. 3 meals are served at the Bastille, and, as the prisoners, having nothing to do, are always eating. A 10-franc man cost me 7.5 francs. But did you not say that you treated those at 10 francs like those at 15? Yes, certainly. Very well. Then you gain 7.5 francs upon those who pay you 15 francs. I must compensate myself somehow, said Baisemeaux, who saw how he had been snapped up. You are quite right, my dear governor, but have you no prisoners below 10 francs? Oh, yes, we have citizens and barristers at 5 francs. And do they eat, too? Not a doubt about it. Only you understand that they do not get fish or poultry, nor rich wines at every meal, but at all events thrice a week they have a good dish at their dinner. Really, you are quite a philanthropist, my dear governor, and you will ruin yourself. No, understand me. When the 15-franc has not eaten his fowl, or the 10-franc has left his dish unfinished, I send it to the 5-franc prisoner. It is a feast for the poor devil, and one must be charitable, you know. And what do you make out of your 5-franc prisoners? 1.5 francs. Baisemeaux, you're an honest fellow. In honest truth I say so. Thank you, my lord, but I feel most of the small tradesmen and bailiffs' clerks, who are rated at 3 francs. They do not often see Rhine carp or channel sturgeon. But do not the 5-franc gentlemen sometimes leave some scraps? Oh, my lord, do not believe I am so stingy as that. I delight the heart of some poor little tradesman or clerk by sending him a wing of a red partridge, a slice of venison, or a slice of a truffled pasty, dishes which he never tasted except in his dreams. These are the leavings of the 24-franc prisoners. And as he eats and drinks, at dessert he cries, "Long live the king," and blesses the Bastille. With a couple of bottles of champagne, which cost me 5 sous, I made him tipsy every Sunday. That class of people called down blessings upon me, and are sorry to leave the prison. Do you know that I have remarked, and it does me infinite honor, that certain prisoners who have been set at liberty have, almost immediately afterwards, got imprisoned again? Why should this be the case, unless it be to enjoy the pleasures of my kitchen? It is really the fact. Aramis smiled with an expression of incredulity. You smile, said Baisemeaux. I do, returned Aramis. I tell you that we have names which have been inscribed on our books thrice in the space of 2 years. I must see it before I believe it, said Aramis. Well, I can show it to you, although it is prohibited to communicate the registers to strangers, and if you really wish to see it with your own eyes. I should be delighted, I confess. Very well, said Baisemeaux, and he took out of a cupboard a large register. Aramis followed him most anxiously with his eyes, and Baisemeaux returned, placed the register upon the table, and turned over the leaf for a minute, and stayed at the letter M. Look here, said he, Matinia, January, 1659, Matinia, June, 1660, Matinia, March, 1661, Mazarinades, etc. You understand it was only a pretext. People were not sent to the Bastille for jokes against M. Mazarin. The fellow denounced himself in order to get imprisoned here. And what was his object? None other than to return to my kitchen at 3 francs a day. 3 francs, poor devil. The poet, my lord, belongs to the lowest scale, the same style of board as a small tradesman and bailiff clerk. But I repeat, it is to those people only that I give these little surprises. Aramis mechanically turned over the leaves of the register, continuing to read the names, but without appearing to take any interest in the names he read. In 1661, you perceive, said Basmos, 80 entries, and in 1659, 80 also. "Aye," said Aramis. "Selden, I seem to know that name. Was it not you who spoke to me about a certain young man?" "Yes, a poor devil of a student, who made, what do you call that where two Latin verses rhyme together?" "A distich." "Yes, that is it. Poor fellow, for a distich. Do you know that he made this distich against the Jesuits? That makes no difference. The punishment seems very severe. Do not pity him. Last year you seemed to interest yourself in him." "Yes, I did so." "Well, as your interest is all-powerful here, my lord, I have treated him since that time as a prisoner at 15 francs. "The same as this one." "Then," said Aramis, who had continued turning over the leaves, and who had stopped at one of the names which followed Martinia. "Yes, the same as that one." "Is that Macchiali in Italian?" said Aramis, pointing with his finger to the name which had attracted his attention. "Hush," said Basmos. "Why hush?" said Aramis, involuntarily clenching his white hand. "I thought I had already spoken to you about that Macchiali." "No, it is the first time I ever heard his name pronounced." "That may be, but perhaps I have spoken to you about him without naming him." "Is he an old offender?" asked Aramis, attempting to smile. "On the contrary, he is quite young." "Is his crime, then, very heinous?" "Unpardonable." "Has he assassinated anyone?" "Bah!" "An incendiary, then?" "Bah!" "Has he slandered anyone?" "No, no. It is he who," and Basmos approached Aramis's ear, making a sort of e-trumpet of his hands, and whispered, "It is he who presumes to resemble the—" "Yes, yes," said Aramis. "I now remember you already spoke about it last year to me, but the crime appeared to me so slight." "Slight, do you say? Or rather, so involuntary?" "My lord, it is not involuntarily that such a resemblance is detected." "Well, the fact is, I had forgotten it. But, my dear host," said Aramis, closing the register, "if I am not mistaken, we are summoned." Basmos took the register, hastily restored it to its place in the closet, which he locked, and put the key in his pocket. "Will it be agreeable to your lordship to breakfast now?" said he, "for you are right in supposing that breakfast was announced." "Assuredly, my dear governor," and they passed into the dining room. Chapter 99. The breakfast at Monsieur de Basmos's. Aramis was generally temperate, but on this occasion, while taking every care of his constitution, he did ample justice to Basmos's breakfast, which, in all respects, was most excellent. The latter, on his side, was animated with the wildest gaiety. The sight of the 5,000 pistoles, which he glanced at from time to time, seemed to open his heart. Every now and then he looked at Aramis with an expression of the deepest gratitude, while the latter, leaning back in his chair, took a few sips of wine from his glass with the air of a connoisseur. "Let me never hear any words against the fare of the Bastille," said he, half closing his eyes. "Happy are the prisoners who can get only half a bottle of such Burgundy every day." "All those at 15 francs drink it," said Basmos. "It is very old Volnay. Does that poor student, Selden, drink such good wine?" "Oh, no. I thought I heard you say he was boarded at 15 francs. "He? No, indeed, a man who makes distichs, I mean, at 15 francs. No, no, it is his neighbor who is at 15 francs. "Which neighbor?" "The other, second Bertadier." "Excuse me, my dear governor, but you speak a language which requires quite an apprenticeship to understand." "Very true," said the governor. "Allow me to explain. Second Bertadier is a person who occupies the second floor of the tower of the Bertadier." "So that Bertaudier is the name of one of the towers of the Bastille?" "The fact is, I think I recollect hearing that each tower has a name of its own." Whereabouts is the one you are speaking of? Look, said Basmos, going to the window. It is that tower to the left, the second one. Is the prisoner at 15 francs there? Yes. Since when? 7 or 8 years. Nearly. What do you mean by nearly? Do you not know the dates more precisely? It was not in my time, M. de Herblay. But I should have thought that Louvière or Tremblay would have told you. The secrets of the Bastille are never handed over with the keys of the governorship. Indeed, then the cause of his imprisonment is a mystery, a state secret. Oh no, I do not suppose it is a state secret, but a secret, like everything else that happens at the Bastille. But, said Aramis, why do you speak more freely of Selden than of second Bertaudiere? Because, in my opinion, the crime of the man who writes a distich is not so great as that of the man who resembles. Yes, I understand you. Still, do not the turnkeys talk with your prisoners? Of course. The prisoners, I suppose, tell them they are not guilty. They are always telling them that. It is a matter of course, the same song over and over again. But does not the resemblance you were speaking about just now strike the turnkeys? My dear M. de Herblay, it is only for men attached to the court, as you are, to take trouble about such matters. You're right, my dear M. Basmos. Let me give you another taste of this Volnay. As you please. And Aramis and the governor nodded to each other as they drank their wine. But, said Aramis, looking with fixed attention at the ruby-colored wine he had raised to the level of his eyes, as if he wished to enjoy it with all his senses at the same moment, but what you might call resemblance, another would not, perhaps, take any notice of. Most certainly he would, though, if it were anyone who knew the person he resembles. I really think, dear M. Basmos, that it can be nothing more than a resemblance of your own creation. Upon my honor, it is not so. Stay, continued Aramis. I have seen many persons very like the one we are speaking of, but out of respect, no one ever said anything about it. Very likely, because there is resemblance and resemblance. This is a striking one, and if you were to see him, you would admit it to be so. If I were to see him, indeed, said Aramis in an indifferent tone, but in all probability I never shall. Why not? Because if I were even to put my foot inside one of those horrible dungeons, I should fancy I was buried there forever. I really do not, and cannot believe it, and that is a fact. Pray do not speak ill of second Bertaudiere. It is really a good room, very nicely furnished and carpeted. The young fellow has by no means been unhappy there. The best lodging the Bastille affords has been his. There is a chance for you. Nay, said Aramis, coldly. You will never make me believe there are any good rooms in the Bastille, and, as for your carpets, they exist only in your imagination. I should find nothing but spiders, rats, and perhaps toads, too. Toads, cried Basmos. Yes, in the dungeons. Ah, I don't say there are not toads in the dungeons, replied Basmos. But will you be convinced by your own eyes? He continued, with a sudden impulse. No, certainly not. Not even to satisfy yourself of the resemblance which you deny, as you do the carpets. Some spectral-looking person, a mere shadow, an unhappy, dying man. Nothing of the kind, as brisk and vigorous a young fellow as ever lived. Melancholy and ill-tempered, then, not at all, very gay and lively. Nonsense, you are joking. Will you follow me? Said Basmos. What for? To go the round of the Bastille. Why? You will then see for yourself, see with your own eyes. But the regulations, never mind them. Today my major has leave of absence. The lieutenant is visiting the post on the bastions. We are sole masters of the situation. No, my dear governor. Why, the very idea of the sound of the bolts makes me shudder. You will only have to forget me in second or fourth Bertaudiere, and then... You are refusing an opportunity that may never present itself again. Do you know that, to obtain the favor I propose to you gratis, some of the princes of the blood have offered me as much as 50,000 francs? Really, he must be worth seeing. Then, forbidden fruit, my lord, forbidden fruit. You belong to the church, ought to know that. Well, if I had any curiosity, it would be to see the poor author of the distich. Very well, we will see him, too. But if I were at all curious, it would be about the beautiful carpeted room and its loggia. Furniture is very commonplace, and a face with no expression in it offers little or no interest. But a board at 15 francs is always interesting. By the by, I forgot to ask you about that. Why 15 francs for him, and only 3 francs for poor Selden? The distinction made in that instance was a truly noble act, and one which displayed the king's goodness of heart to great advantage. The king's, you say. The cardinal's, I mean. This unhappy man, said M. Mazarin, is destined to remain in prison forever. Why so? Why, it seems that his crime is a lasting one, and, consequently, his punishment ought to be so, too. Lasting? No doubt of it, unless he is fortunate enough to catch the smallpox, and even that is difficult, for we never get any impure air here. Nothing can be more ingenious than your train of reasoning, my dear M. de Bazemose. Do you, however, mean to say that this unfortunate man must suffer without interruption or termination? I did not say he was to suffer. My lord, a 15-franc boarder does not suffer. He suffers imprisonment at all events. No doubt. There is no help for that, but the suffering is sweetened for him. You must admit that this young fellow was not born to eat all the good things he does eat. For instance, such things as we have on the table now, this pasty that has not been touched, these crawfish from the River Marne, of which we have hardly taken any, and which are almost as large as lobsters. All these things will at once be taken to second Bertadais, with a bottle of that Volnay which you think so excellent. After you have seen it, you will believe it, I hope. Yes, my dear governor, certainly. But all this time you are thinking only of your very happy 15-franc prisoner, and you forget poor Selden, my protégé. Well, out of consideration for you, it shall be a gala day for him. He shall have some biscuits and preserves with this small bottle of port. You are a good-hearted fellow. I have said so already, and I repeat it, my dear Bazemose. Well, let us set off, then, said the governor, a little bewildered, partly from the wine he had drunk, and partly from Aramis's praises. Do not forget that I only go to oblige you, said the prelate. Very well, but you will thank me when you get there. Let us go, then. Wait until I have summoned the jailer, said Bazemose, as he struck the bell twice, at which summons a man appeared. I am going to visit the towers, said the governor. No guards, no drums, no noise at all. If I were not to leave my cloak here, said Aramis, pretending to be alarmed, I should really think I was going to prison on my own account. The jailer preceded the governor, Aramis walking on his right hand. Some of the soldiers who happened to be in the courtyard drew themselves up in line, as stiff as posts, as the governor passed along. Bazemose led the way down several steps which conducted to a sort of esplanade. Thence they arrived at the drawbridge, where the sentinels on duty received the governor with the proper honors. The governor turned toward Aramis, and, speaking in such a tone that the sentinel could not lose a word, he observed, I hope you have a good memory, monsieur? Why? Inquired Aramis. On account of your plans and your measurements, for you know that no one is allowed, not architects even, to enter where the prisoners are, with paper, pens, or pencil. Good, said Aramis to himself. It seems I'm an architect, then. It sounds like one of D'Artagnan's jokes, who perceived in me the engineer Belle-Isle. Then he added aloud, Be easy on that score, monsieur. In our profession, a mere glance and a good memory are quite sufficient. Bazemose did not change countenance, and the soldiers took Aramis for what he seemed to be. Very well. We will first visit La Bertadais, said Bazemose, still intending the sentinels to hear him. Then, turning to the jailer, He added, "You will take the opportunity of carrying to number 2 the few dainties I pointed out." "Dear and Abasmos," said Aramis, "you are always forgetting number 3. "So I am," said the governor, and upon that they began to ascend. The number of bolts, gratings, and locks of this single courtyard would have sufficed for the safety of an entire city. Aramis was neither an imaginative nor sensitive man. He had been somewhat of a poet in his youth, but his heart was hard and indifferent, as the heart of every man of 55 years of age is, who has been frequently and passionately attached to women in his lifetime, or rather who has been passionately loved by them. But when he placed his foot upon the worn stone steps, along which so many unhappy wretches had passed, when he felt himself impregnated, as it were, with the atmosphere of those gloomy dungeons, moistened with tears, there could be but little doubt he was overcome by his feelings, for his head was bowed and his eyes became dim, as he followed Basmos without a syllable. Chapter 100. The second floor of La Bertaudiere. On the second flight of stairs, whether from fatigue or emotion, the breathing of the visitor began to fail him, and he leaned against the wall. "Will you begin with this one?" said Basmos. "For since we are going to both, it matters very little whether we ascend from the second to the third story, or descend from the third to the second." The prisoner had not stirred. Basmos then entered, while Aramis remained at the threshold, from which place he saw a youth about 18 years of age, who, raising his head at the unusual noise, jumped off the bed as he perceived the governor, and clasping his hands together, began to cry out, "My mother, my mother," in tones which betrayed such deep distress that Aramis, despite his command over himself, felt a shudder pass through his frame. "My dear boy," said Basmos, endeavoring to smile, "I have brought you a diversion and an extra, the one for the mind, the other for the body. This gentleman has come to take your measure, and here are some preserves for your dessert. But I have heard you say that your mother was very poor, and that you were very badly lodged when you were living with her, while here, upon my word. If she were poor, monsieur, the greater reason to restore her only means of support to her. Badly lodged with her. Oh, monsieur, everyone is always well lodged when he is free. At all events, since you yourself admit you have done nothing but write that unhappy distich. But without any intention, I swear, let me be punished, cut off the hand which wrote it. I will work with the other, but restore my mother to me." "My boy," said Basmos, "you know very well that it does not depend upon me. All I can do for you is to increase your rations, give you a glass of port wine now and then, slip in a biscuit for you between a couple of plates." Aramis, unable to bear the scene any longer, withdrew as far as the landing. "Unhappy, wretched man," he murmured. "In what way?" "No doubt. Why did they let him learn Latin? Too much knowledge. You see, it is that which does harm. Now I, for instance, can't read or write, and therefore I am not in prison." Aramis looked at the man, who seemed to think that being a jailer in the Bastille was not being in prison. As for Basmos, noticing the little effect produced by his advice and his port wine, he left the dungeon quite upset. "You have forgotten to close the door," said the jailer. "So I have," said Basmos. "There are the keys. Do you do it?" "I will solicit the pardon of that poor boy," said Aramis. "And if you do not succeed," said Basmos, "at least beg that he may be transferred to the 10-franc list, by which both he and I shall be gainers." "If the other prisoner calls out for his mother in a similar manner," said Aramis, "I prefer not to enter at all, but will take my measure from outside." "No fear of that, Monsieur Architect. The one we are now going to see is as gentle as a lamb. Before he could call after his mother, he must open his lips, and he never says a word." "Let us go in. Then," said Aramis, gloomily. "Are you the architect of the prisons, monsieur?" said the jailer. "I am." "It is odd, then, that you are not more accustomed to all this." Aramis perceived that, to avoid giving rise to any suspicions, he must summon all his strength of mind to his assistance. Basmos, who carried the keys, opened the door. "Stay outside," he said to the jailer, "and wait for us at the bottom of the steps." The jailer obeyed and withdrew. Baisemeaux entered first and opened the second door himself. By the light which filtered through the iron-barred window could be seen a handsome young man, short in stature, with closely cut hair and a beard beginning to grow. He was sitting on a stool, his elbow resting on an armchair, and all the upper part of his body reclining against it. His dress, thrown upon the bed, was of rich black velvet, and he inhaled the fresh air which blew in upon his breast through a shirt of the very finest cambric. As the governor entered, the young man turned his head with a look full of indifference, and on recognizing Baisemeaux, he arose and saluted him courteously. But when his eyes fell upon Aramis, who remained in the background, the latter trembled, turned pale, and his hat, which he held in his hand, fell upon the ground, as if all his muscles had become relaxed at once. Baisemeaux, habituated to the presence of his prisoner, did not seem to share any of the sensations which Aramis experienced, but, with all the zeal of a good servant, he busied himself in arranging on the table the pasty and crawfish he had brought with him. Occupied in this manner, he did not remark how disturbed his guest had become. When he had finished, however, he turned to the young prisoner and said, "You are looking very well. Are you so?" "Quite well, I thank you, monsieur," replied the young man. The effect of the voice was such as almost overpowered Aramis, and notwithstanding his control over himself, he advanced a few steps towards him, with his eyes wide open and his lips trembling. The movement he made was so marked that Baisemeaux, notwithstanding his preoccupation, observed it. "This gentleman is an architect who has come to examine your chimney," said Baisemeaux. "Does it smoke?" "Never, monsieur." "You were saying just now," said the governor, rubbing his hands together, "that it was not possible for a man to be happy in prison. He, however, is one who is so. You have nothing to complain of, I hope?" "Nothing." "Do you ever feel weary?" said Aramis. "Never." "Ha! Ha!" said Baisemeaux, in a low tone of voice. "Was I right?" "Well, my dear governor, it is impossible not to yield evidence. Is it allowed to put any question to him?" "As many as you like." "Very well. Be good enough to ask him if he knows why he is here." "This gentleman requests me to ask you," said Baisemeaux, "if you are aware of the cause of your imprisonment." "No, monsieur," said the young man, unaffectedly. "I am not." "That is hardly possible," said Aramis, carried away by his feelings in spite of himself. "If you were really ignorant of the cause of your detention, you would be furious." "I was so during the early days of my imprisonment." "Why are you not so now?" "Because I have reflected." "That is strange," said Aramis. "Is it not odd?" said Baisemeaux. "May one venture to ask you, monsieur, on what you have reflected?" "I felt that as I had committed no crime, heaven could not punish me." "What is a prison, then?" inquired Aramis, "if it be no punishment?" "Alas, I cannot tell," said the young man. "All that I can tell you now is the very opposite of what I felt 7 years ago. To hear you converse, to witness your resignation, one might almost believe that you like your imprisonment. I enjoy it. In the certainty of recovering your freedom some day, I suppose. I have no certainty. Hope I have, and that is all, and yet I acknowledge that this hope becomes less every day. Still, why should you not again be free, since you have already been so?" "That is precisely the reason," replied the young man, "which prevents me expecting liberty. Why should I have been imprisoned at all if it had been intended to release me afterwards?" "How old are you?" "I do not know." "What is your name?" "I have forgotten the name by which I was called." "Who are your parents?" "I never knew them." "But those who brought you up?" "They did not call me their son." "I love my nurse and my flowers." "Was that all?" "I also love my valet." "Do you regret your nurse and your valet?" "I wept very much when they died." "Did they die since you have been here, or before you came?" "Both at the same time." "Yes, both at the same time." "In what manner were you carried off?" "A man came for me, directed me to get into a carriage, which was closed and locked, and brought me here." Would you be able to recognize that man again? He was masked. Is not this an extraordinary tale? Said Basmos, in a low tone of voice, to Aramis, who could hardly breathe. It is indeed extraordinary, he murmured. But what is still more extraordinary is that he has never told me so much as he has just told you. It's possible, replied Basmos. I have no curiosity. Have you looked at the room? It's a fine one, is it not? Beautiful. I'll wager he had nothing like it before he came here. Yes, indeed, frised by a woman, who each time came to the door in a carriage, and entered covered with a veil, which he raised when we were together and alone. Do you remember that woman? Yes. What did she say to you? What did she do on arriving and on leaving you? She pressed me in her arms, held me in her embrace, and kissed me. Do you remember her? Perfectly. Do you recall her features distinctly? Yes. You would recognize her, then, if accident brought her before you, or led you into her presence. Most certainly. A flush of fleeting satisfaction passed across Aramis's face. At this moment Basmos heard the jailer approaching. Shall we leave? He said, hastily, to Aramis. Aramis, who probably had learnt all that he cared to know, replied, when you like. The young man saw them prepare to leave, and saluted them politely. Basmos replied merely by a nod of the head, while Aramis, with a respect, arising perhaps from the sight of such misfortune, saluted the prisoner profoundly. They left the room, Basmos closing the door behind them. Well, said Basmos, as they descended the staircase, what do you think of it all? I have discovered the secret, my dear governor, he said. Wow! What is the secret? Then, a murder was committed in that house. Nonsense. But attend, the valet and nurse died the same day. Well, and by poison. What do you think? That it is very likely to be true. What? That young man is an assassin. Who said that? What makes you think that poor young fellow could be an assassin? The very thing I was saying. A crime was committed in his house, said Aramis, and that was quite sufficient. Perhaps he saw the criminals, and it was feared that he might say something. The deuce! If I only thought that. Well, I would redouble the surveillance. Oh, he does not seem to wish to escape. You do not know what prisoners are. Has he any books? None. They are strictly prohibited, and under M. de Mazarin's own hand. Have you the writing still? Yes, my lord. Would you like to look at it as you return to take your cloak? I should, for I like to look at autographs. Well, then, this one is of the most unquestionable authenticity. There is only one erasure. Ah, an erasure. And in what respect? With respect to a figure. At first there was written, to be boarded at 50 francs. As princes of the blood, in fact. But the cardinal must have seen his mistake, you understand. For he cancelled the 0, and has added a 1 before the 5. But, by the by. What? You do not speak of the resemblance. I do not speak of it, damned Basmos, for a very simple reason, because it does not exist. The deuce it doesn't. Oh, if it does exist, it is only in your own imagination. But supposing it were to exist elsewhere, I think it would be better for you not to speak about it. Really? The king, Louis XIV, you understand, would be excessively angry with you if he were to learn that you contributed in any way to spread the report that one of his subjects has the effrontery to resemble him. It is true, quite true, said Basmos, thoroughly alarmed. But I have not spoken of the circumstance to anyone but yourself, and you understand, Monseigneur, that I perfectly rely on your discretion. Oh, be easy. Do you still wish to see the note? Certainly. While engaged in this manner in conversation, they had returned to the governor's apartments. Basmos took from the cupboard a private register, like the one he had already shown Aramis, but fastened by a lock, the key which opened it being one of a small bunch of keys which Baisemeaux always carried with him. Then, placing the book upon the table, he opened it at the letter M and showed Aramis the following note in the column of observations. No books at any time, all linen and clothes of the finest and best quality to be procured, no exercise, always the same jailer, no communications with anyone, musical instruments, every liberty and every indulgence which his welfare may require, to be boarded at 15 francs. M. de Baisemeaux can claim more if the 15 francs be not sufficient. Ah, said Baisemeaux, now I think of it, I shall claim it. Aramis shut the book. Yes, he said, it is indeed M. de Mazarin's handwriting. I recognize it well. Now, my dear governor, he continued, as if this last communication had exhausted his interest, let us now turn to our own little affairs. Well, what time for repayment do you wish me to take? Fix it yourself. There need not be any particular period fixed. Give me a simple acknowledgment for 150,000 francs. When to be made payable? When I require it. But, you understand, I shall only wish it when you yourself do. Oh, I am quite easy on that score, said Baisemeaux, smiling. But I have already given you 2 receipts. Which I now destroy, said Aramis, and after having shown the 2 receipts of Baisemeaux, he destroyed them, overcome by so great a mark of confidence. Baisemeaux unhesitatingly wrote out an acknowledgment of a debt of 150,000 francs, payable at the pleasure of the prelate. Aramis, who had, by glancing over the governor's shoulder, followed the pen as he wrote, put the acknowledgment into his pocket without seeming to have read it, which made Baisemeaux perfectly easy. Now, said Aramis, you will not be angry with me if I were to carry off one of your prisoners. What do you mean? By obtaining his pardon, of course. Have I not already told you that I took a great interest in poor Selden? That is your affair. Do as you think proper. I see you have an open hand and an arm that can reach a great way. Adieu, adieu. And Aramis left, carrying with him the governor's best wishes. At the very time M. de Baisemeaux was showing Aramis the prisoners in the Bastille, a carriage drew up at Madame de Bellier's door, and, at that still early hour, a young woman alighted, her head muffled in a silk hood. When the servants announced Madame Vanel to Madame de Bellier, the latter was engaged, or rather was absorbed, in reading a letter which she hurriedly concealed. She had hardly finished her morning toilette, her maid being still in the next room. At the name, at the footsteps of Marguerite Vanel, Madame de Bellier ran to meet her. She fancied she could detect in her friend's eyes a brightness which was neither that of health nor pleasure. Marguerite embraced her, pressed her hands, and hardly allowed her time to speak. Dearest, she said, have you forgotten me? Have you quite given yourself up to the pleasures of the court? What are you doing with yourself? Then, for Bellier, yes, you are becoming rustic in your tastes. Then, I delight to see you so disposed. But you are pale. No, I am perfectly well. So much the better. I was becoming uneasy about you. You do not know what I have been told. People say so many things. Yes, but this is very singular. How well you know how to excite curiosity, Marguerite. Well, I was afraid of vexing you. Never. You have yourself always admired me for my evenness of temper. Well, then, it is said that, no, I shall never be able to tell you. Do not let us talk about it, then, said Madame de Bellier, who detected the ill nature that was concealed by all these prefaces, yet felt the most anxious curiosity on the subject. Well, then, my dear Marquise, it is said that, for some time past, you no longer continue to regret Monsieur de Bellier as you used to. It is an ill-natured report, Marguerite. I do regret and shall always regret my husband, but it is now 2 years since he died. I am only 28 years old, and my grief at his loss ought not always to control every action and thought of my life. You, Marguerite, who are the model of a wife, would not believe me if I were to say so. Why not? Your heart is so soft and yielding, she said, spitefully. Yours is so too, Marguerite. And yet I did not perceive that you allowed yourself to be overcome by grief when your heart was wounded. These words were in direct allusion to Marguerite's rupture with the superintendent, and were also a veiled but direct reproach made against her friend's heart. As if she only awaited this signal to discharge his shaft, Marguerite exclaimed, "Well, Elise, it is said you are in love." And she looked fixedly at Madame de Bellier, who blushed against her will. "Women never escape slander," replied the Marquise, after a moment's pause. "No one slanders you, Elise." "What? People say that I am in love, and yet they do not slander me. In the first place, if it be true, it is no slander, but simply a scandal-loving report. In the next place, for you did not allow me to finish what I was saying, the public does not assert that you have abandoned yourself to this passion. It represents you, on the contrary, as a virtuous but loving woman, defending yourself with claws and teeth, shutting yourself up in your own house as in a fortress, in other respects, as impenetrable as that of Denis, notwithstanding Denis' tower was made of brass. "You are witty, Marguerite," said Madame de Bellier angrily. "You always flatter me, Elise. In short, however, you are reported to be incorruptible and unapproachable. You cannot decide whether the world is calumniating you or not. But what is it you are musing about while I am speaking to you?" "I?" "Yes, you are blushing and do not answer me." "I was trying," said the Marquise, raising her beautiful eyes brightened with an indication of growing temper. "I was trying to discover to what you could possibly have alluded. You were so learned in mythological subjects in comparing me to Danae." "You were trying to guess that?" said Marguerite, laughing. "Yes. Do you not remember that at the convent, when we were solving our problems in arithmetic? Ah, what I have to tell you is learned also, but it is my tone. Do you not remember that if one of the terms were given, we were to find out the other? Therefore do you guess now? I cannot conjecture what you mean. And yet nothing is more simple. You pretend that I am in love, do you not? So it is said. Very well. It is not said, I suppose, that I am in love with an abstraction. There must surely be a name mentioned in this report. Certainly, a name is mentioned. Very well. It is not surprising, then, that I should try to guess his name, since you do not tell it. My dear Marquise, when I saw you blush, I did not think you would have to spend much time in conjectures. It was the word Danae which you used that surprised me. Danae means a shower of gold, does it not? That is to say, that the Jupiter of Danae changed himself into a shower of gold for her. My lover, then, he whom you assign me. I beg your pardon. I am your friend, and assign you no one. That may be, but those who are disposed towards me. Do you wish to hear the name? I have been waiting this half hour for it. Well, then, you shall hear it. Do not be shocked. He is a man high in power. Good, said the Marquise, as she clenched her hands like a patient at the approach of a knife. He is a very wealthy man, continued Marguerite. The wealthiest, it may be. In a word, it is the Duke of Buckingham, said Marguerite, bursting into laughter. This perfidy had been calculated with extreme ability. The name that was pronounced, instead of the name which the Marquise awaited, had precisely the same effect upon her as the badly sharpened axes that had hacked, without destroying, Messrs. de Celle and de Thou upon the scaffold. She recovered herself, however, and said, I was perfectly right in saying you were a witty woman, for you are making the time pass away most agreeably. This joke is a most amusing one, for I have never seen the Duke of Buckingham. I have never even left my own house since the Duke has been at Paris. Oh, resumed Madame Vanel, stretching out her foot towards a paper which was lying on the carpet near the window, it is not necessary for people to see each other, since they can write. The Marquise trembled, for this paper was the envelope of the letter she was reading as a friend had entered, and was sealed with the superintendent's arms. As she leaned back on the sofa on which she was sitting, Madame de Bellier covered the paper with the thick folds of her large silk dress, and so concealed it. Come, Marguerite, Tell me, is it to tell me all these foolish reports that you have come to see me so early in the day? No, I came to see you, in the first place, and to remind you of those habits of our earlier days, so delightful to remember, when we used to wander about together at Vincennes, and, sitting beneath an oak, or in some sylvan shade, used to talk of those we loved and who loved us. Do you propose that we should go out together now? I am not dressed yet, Marguerite. But if you wish that we should talk together, we can, without going to the woods of Vincennes, find in my own garden here beautiful trees, shady groves, a greensward covered with daisies and violets, the perfume of which can be perceived from where we are sitting. I regret your refusal, my dear Marquise, for I wanted to pour out my whole heart into yours. I repeat again, Marguerite, my heart is yours just as much in this room, or beneath the lime trees in the garden here, as it will be under the oaks in the wood yonder. It is not the same thing for me. In approaching Vincennes, Marquise, my ardent aspirations approach nearer to that object towards which they have for some days past been directed. The Marquise suddenly raised her head. Are you surprised, then, that I am still thinking of Saint Mandé? Of Saint Mandé, exclaimed Madame de Bellier, and the looks of both women met each other like two resistless swords. You, so proud, said the Marquise, disdainfully. I, so proud, replied Madame Vanel. Such is my nature. I do not forgive neglect. I cannot endure infidelity. When I leave anyone who weeps at my abandonment, I feel induced still to love him. But when others forsake me and laugh at their infidelity, I love distractedly. Madame de Bellier could not restrain an involuntary movement. She is jealous, said Marguerite to herself. Then, continued the Marquise, you are quite enamored of the Duke of Buckingham, I mean of M. Fouquet? Elise felt the illusion, and her blood seemed to congeal in her heart. And you wish to go to Vincennes, to Saint Mandé, even. I hardly know what I wished. You would have advised me, perhaps. In what respect? You have often done so. Most certainly I should not have done so in the present instance, for I do not forgive as you do. I am less loving. Perhaps, when my heart has been once wounded, it remains so always. But M. Fouquet has not wounded you, said Marguerite Vanel, with the most perfect simplicity. You perfectly understand what I mean. M. Fouquet has not wounded me. I do not know of either obligation or injury received at his hands, but you have reason to complain of him. You are my friend, and I am afraid I should not advise you as you would like. Ah, you are prejudging the case. The sighs you spoke of just now more than indications. Oh, said the Marquise, placing her hand upon her heart. Something new, then, has occurred. Do you not know it? I am utterly ignorant of everything about him, said Madame de Bellier, with a poignant anguish that suspends thought and speech, and even life itself. In the first place, then, the king's favor is entirely withdrawn from M. Fouquet, and conferred on M. Colbert. So it is stated. It is very clear, since the discovery of the plot of Belle Isle. I was told that the discovery of the fortifications there had turned out to M. Fouquet's honor. Marguerite began to laugh in so cruel a manner that Madame de Bellier could at that moment have delightedly plunged a dagger in her bosom. Dearest, continued Marguerite, there is no longer any question of M. Fouquet's honor. His safety is concerned. Before 3 days are past, the ruin of the superintendent will be complete. Stay, said the Marquise, in a turn smiling. That is going a little too fast. I said 3 days, because I wish to deceive myself with a hope, but probably the catastrophe will be complete within 24 hours. Why so? For the simplest of all reasons, that M. Fouquet has no more money. In matters of finance, my dear Marguerite, some are without money today, who tomorrow can procure millions. That might be M. Fouquet's case when he had 2 wealthy and clever friends who amassed money for him and wrung it from every possible or impossible source, but those friends are dead. Money does not die, Marguerite. It may be concealed, but it can be looked for, sought, and found. You see things on the bright side, and so much the better for you. It is really very unfortunate that you are not the Egeria of M. Fouquet. You might now show him the source whence he could obtain the millions which the king asked him for yesterday. Millions, said the Marquise in terror. 4, an even number. Infamous, murmured Madame de Bellier, tortured by a friend's merciless delight. M. Fouquet, I should think, must certainly have for millions, she replied courageously. If he has those which the king requires today, said Marguerite, he will not, perhaps, possess those which the king will demand in a month or so. The king will exact money from him again, then, no doubt, and that is my reason for saying that the ruin of poor M. Fouquet is inevitable. Pride will induce him to furnish the money, and when he has no more, he will fall. It is true, said the Marquise, trembling. The plan is a bold one, but tell me, does M. Colbert hate M. Fouquet so very much? I think he does not like him. M. Colbert is powerful. He improves on close acquaintance. He has gigantic ideas, a strong will, and discretion. He will rise. He will be superintendent. It is probable, such is the reason, my dear Marquise, why I felt myself impressed in favor of that poor man who once loved and even adored me, and why, when I see him so unfortunate, I forgive his infidelity which I have reason to believe he also regrets, and why, moreover, I should not have been disinclined to afford him some consolation or some good advice. He would have understood the step I had taken, and would have thought kindly of me for it. It is gratifying to be loved. You know, men value love more highly when they are no longer blinded by its influence. The Marquise, bewildered and overcome by these cruel attacks, which had been calculated with the greatest nicety and precision, hardly knew what answer to return. She even seemed to have lost all power of thought. Her perfidious friend's voice had assumed the most affectionate tone. She spoke as a woman, but concealed the instincts of a wolf. Well, said Madame de Bellier, who had a vague hope that Marguerite would cease to overwhelm a vanquished enemy, why do you not go and see M. Fouquet? Decidedly, Marquise, you have made me reflect. No, it would be unbecoming for me to make the first advance. M. Fouquet no doubt loves me, but he is too proud. I cannot expose myself to an affront. Besides, I have my husband to consider. You tell me nothing? Very well. I shall consult M. Colbert on the subject. Marguerite rose smilingly, as though to take leave, but the Marquise had not the strength to imitate her. Marguerite advanced a few paces, in order that she might continue to enjoy the humiliating grief in which her rival was plunged, and then said, suddenly, you do not accompany me to the door, then? The Marquise rose, pale and almost lifeless, without thinking of the envelope, which had occupied her attention so greatly at the commencement of the conversation, and which was revealed at the first step she took. She then opened the door of her oratory, and without even turning her head towards Marguerite Vanel, entered it, closing the door after her. Marguerite said, or rather muttered a few words, which Madame de Bellier did not even hear. As soon, however, as the Marquise had disappeared, her envious enemy, not being able to resist a desire to satisfy herself that her suspicions were well-founded, advanced stealthily towards it like a panther and seized the envelope. Ow! She said, gnashing her teeth. It was indeed a letter from M. Fouquet she was reading when I arrived, and then darted out of the room. During this interval, the Marquise, having arrived behind the rampart, as it were, of a door, felt that her strength was failing her. For a moment she remained rigid, pale and motionless as a statue, and then, like a statue shaken on its base by an earthquake, tottered and fell inanimate on the carpet. The noise of the fall resounded at the same moment as the rolling of Marguerite's carriage leaving the hotel. Chapter 102. Madame de Bellier's Plate. The crooked Adams of Descartes triumphed. To the man without compassion was united a woman without heart. The Marquise perceived, with sorrow rather than indignation, that the king was an accomplice in the plot which betrayed the duplicity of Louis XIII. In his advanced age, and the avarice of Mazarin at a period of life when he had not had the opportunity of gorging himself with French gold, the spirit of this courageous woman soon resumed its energy, no longer overwhelmed by indulgence in compassionate lamentations. The Marquise was not one to weep when action was necessary, nor to waste time in bewailing a misfortune as long as means still existed of relieving it. For some minutes she buried her face in her cold fingers, and then, raising her head, rang for her attendants with a steady hand, and with a gesture betraying a fixed determination of purpose. Her resolution was taken. "Is everything prepared for my departure?" she inquired of one of her female attendants who entered. "Yes, madam, but it was not expected that your ladyship would leave for Bellier for the next few days." "Yes, madam, but hitherto we have been in the habit of leaving them in Paris. Your ladyship does not generally take your jewels with you into the country." "But they are all in order, you say?" "Yes, in your ladyship's own room. The gold plate in the chest, and the silver plate in the great oak closet." Her attendants quitted the room to execute the order. The Marquise, however, had entered her own room and was inspecting her casket of jewels with the greatest attention. Never, until now, had she bestowed such close attention upon riches in which women take so much pride. Never, until now, had she looked at her jewels except for the purpose of making a selection according to their settings or their colors. On this occasion, however, she admired the size of the rubies and the brilliancy of the diamonds. She grieved over every blemish and every defect. She thought the gold light and the stones wretched. The goldsmith, as he entered, found her thus occupied. "M. Fauchot," she said, "I believe you supplied me with my gold service." "I do not now remember the amount of the account." "Of the new service, madam, or that which M. de Bellier presented to you on your marriage, for I have furnished both." "First of all, the new one. The covers, the goblets, and the dishes, with their covers, the eau-pain, the ice pails, the dishes, the preserves, and the tea and coffee urns, cost your ladyship 60,000 francs. No more. Your ladyship thought the account very high." Yes, I remember, in fact, that it was dear, but it was the workmanship, I suppose." "Yes, madam, the designs, the chasings, all new patterns." "What proportion of the cost does the workmanship form? Do not hesitate to tell me." "A third of its value, madam. There is the other service, the old one, that which belonged to my husband." "Yes, madam, there is less workmanship in that than in the other. Its intrinsic value does not exceed 30,000 francs." 30,000, murmured the Marquise. "But, M. Fauchot, there is also the service which belonged to my mother, all that massive plate which I did not wish to part with on account of the associations connected with it." "Ah, madam, that would indeed be an excellent resource for those who, unlike your ladyship, might not be in a position to keep their plate, in chasing that they worked in solid metal. But that service is no longer in fashion. Its weight is its only advantage. That is all I care about. How much does it weigh?" 50,000 livres at the very least. I do not allude to the enormous vases for the buffet, which alone weigh 5,000 livres, or 10,000 to pay. 130, murmured the Marquise. "You are quite sure of your figures, M. Fauchot?" "Positive, madam. Besides, there is no difficulty in weighing them. The amount is entered in my books. Your ladyship is extremely methodical, I am aware." "Let us now turn to another subject," said Madame de Bellier, and she opened one of her jewel boxes. "I recognize these emeralds," said M. Fauchot, "for it was I who had the setting of them. They are the most beautiful in the whole court." "No, I am mistaken. Madame de Chatillon has the most beautiful set. She had them from Messrs. de Guise, but your set, madam, comes next." "What are they worth?" "Mounted." "No, supposing I wish to sell them." "I know very well who would buy them," exclaimed M. Fauchot. "That is the very thing I ask. They could be sold, then?" "All your jewels could be sold, madam. It is well known that you possess the most beautiful jewels in Paris. You are not changeable in your tastes. When you make a purchase, it is of the very best, and what you purchase you do not part with." "What could these emeralds be sold for, Then 130,000 francs. The Marquise wrote down upon her tablets the amount which the jeweler mentioned. The ruby necklace, she said. Are they Bellas rubies? Madam, here they are. They are beautiful, magnificent. I did not know that your ladyship had these stones. What is their value? 200,000 francs. The center one is alone worth 100,000. I thought so, said the Marquise. As for diamonds, I have them in numbers. Rings, necklaces, sprigs, earrings, clasps. Tell me their value, and for show. The jeweler took his magnifying glass and scales, weighed and inspected them, and silently made his calculations. These stones, he said, must have cost your ladyship an income of 40,000 francs. You value them at 800,000 francs. Nearly so. It is about what I imagined, but the settings are not included. No, madam, but if I were called upon to sell or to buy, I should be satisfied with the gold of the settings alone as my profit upon the transaction. I should make a good 25,000 francs. An agreeable sum. Very much so, madam. Will you accept that profit, then, on condition of converting the jewels into money? 800,000 francs. It is enormous. I know it. Impossible to find. Not so. But reflect, madam, upon the effect which will be produced by the sale of your jewels. No one need know it. You can get sets of false jewels made for me, similar to the real. Do not answer a word. I insist upon it. Sell them separately. Sell the stones only. In that way it is easy. Monsieur is looking out for some sets of jewels, as well as single stones for Madame's toilette. There will be a competition for them. I can easily dispose of 600,000 francs worth to Monsieur. I am certain yours are the most beautiful. In less than 3 days' time. Very well. The remainder you will dispose of among private individuals. For the present, make me out a contract of sale, payment to be made in 4 days. I entreat you to reflect, madam, for if you force the sale, you will lose 100,000 francs. If necessary, I will lose 200. I wish everything to be settled this evening. Do you accept? I do, your ladyship. I will not conceal from you that I shall make 50,000 francs by the transaction. So much the better for you. In what way shall I have the money? Either in gold or in bills of the Bank of Lions, payable at M. Colbay's. I agree, said the Marquise, eagerly. Return home and bring the sum in question in notes as soon as possible. Yes, madam, but for heaven's sake. 50,000 francs, madam. That makes 1,000,000, said the Marquise to herself. M. for show, you will take away with you both the gold and silver plate. I can assign, as a pretext, that I wish it remodeled on patterns more in accordance with my own taste. Melt it down and return me its value in money at once. It shall be done, your ladyship. In Madame de Forchaux's carriage, said the jeweler, if you will allow it, and I will call for it at your house. Certainly, your ladyship. I will direct some of my servants to convey the plate to your house. The Marquise rung. Let the small van be placed at M. Forchaux's disposal, she said. The jeweler bowed and left the house, directing that the van should follow him closely, saying aloud that the Marquise was about to have a plate melted down in order to have other plate manufactured of a more modern style. 3 hours afterward, she went to M. Forchaux's house and received from him 800,000 francs in gold enclosed in a chest, which one of the clerks could hardly carry towards Madame Forchaux's carriage, for Madame Forchaux kept her carriage. As the daughter of a president of accounts, she had brought a marriage portion of 30,000 crowns to her husband, who was syndic of the goldsmiths. These 30,000 crowns had become very fruitful during 20 years. The jeweler, though a millionaire, was a modest man. He had purchased a substantial carriage, built in 1648, 10 years after the king's birth. This carriage, or rather house upon wheels, excited the admiration of the whole quarter in which he resided, It was covered with allegorical paintings and clouds scattered over with stars. The Marquis entered the somewhat extraordinary vehicle, sitting opposite the clerk, who endeavored to put his knees out of the way, afraid even of touching the Marquis's dress. It was the clerk, too, who told the coachman, who was very proud of having a Marquis to drive, to take the road to St. Mandé. Chapter 103. The Dowry. Monsieur Fauchot's horses were serviceable animals, with thick-set knees and legs that had some difficulty in moving. Like the carriage, they belonged to the earlier part of the century. They were not as fleet as the English horses of M. Fouquet, and consequently took 2 hours to get to St. Mandé. Their progress, it might be said, was majestic. Majesty, however, precludes hurry. The Marquise stopped the carriage at the door so well known to her, although she had seen it only once, under circumstances, it will be remembered, no less painful than those which brought her now to it again. She drew a key from a pocket and inserted it in the lock, pushed open the door, which noiselessly yielded to her touch, and directed the clerk to carry the chest upstairs to the first floor. The weight of the chest was so great that the clerk was obliged to get the coachman to assist him with it. They placed it in a small cabinet, anteroom, or boudoir rather, adjoining the saloon where we once saw M. Fouquet at the Marquise's feet. Madame de Bellier gave the coachman a louis, smiled gracefully at the clerk, and dismissed them both. She closed the door after them, and waited in the room, alone and barricaded. There was no servant to be seen about the rooms, but everything was prepared as though some invisible genius had divined the wishes and desires of an expected guest. The fire was laid, candles in the candelabra, refreshments upon the table, books scattered about, fresh-cut flowers in the vases. One might almost have imagined an enchanted house. The Marquise lighted the candles, inhaled the perfume of the flowers, sat down, and was soon plunged in profound thought. Her deep musings, melancholy though they were not untinged with a certain vague joy. Spread out before her was a treasure, a million wrung from a fortune as a gleaner plucks the blue cornflower from a crown of flowers. She conjured up the sweetest dreams. Her principal thought, and one that took precedence of all others, was a devised means of leaving this money for M. Fouquet without his possibly learning from whom the gift had come. This idea, naturally enough, was the first to present itself to her mind, but although, on reflection, it appeared difficult to carry out, she did not despair of success. She would then ring to summon M. Fouquet and make her escape, happier than if, instead of having given a million, she had herself found one. But, being there, and having seen the boudoir so coquettishly decorated that it might almost be said the least particle of dust had but the moment before being removed by the servants, having observed the drawing-room, so perfectly arranged that it might almost be said a presence that had driven away the fairies who were its occupants, she asked herself if the glance or gaze of those whom she had displaced, whether spirits, fairies, elves, or human creatures, had not already recognized her. To secure success, it was necessary that some steps should be seriously taken, and it was necessary also that the superintendent should comprehend the serious position in which he was placed, in order to yield compliance with the generous fancies of a woman. All the fascinations of an eloquent friendship will be required to persuade him, and, should this be insufficient, the maddening influence of a devoted passion, which, in its resolute determination to carry conviction, would not be turned aside. Was not the superintendent, indeed, known for his delicacy and dignity of feeling? Would he allow himself to accept from any woman that of which he had stripped herself? No, he would resist. And if any voice in the world could overcome his resistance, it would be the voice of the woman he loved. Another doubt, and that a cruel one, suggested itself to Madame de Bellier with a sharp, acute pain, like a dagger thrust. Did he really love her? Would that volatile mind, that inconstant heart, be likely to be fixed for a moment, even were it to gaze upon an angel? Was it not the same with Fouquet, notwithstanding his genius and his uprightness of conduct, as with those conquerors on the field of battle who shed tears when they have gained a victory? I must learn if it be so, and must judge of that for myself, said the Marquise. Who can tell whether that heart, so coveted, is not common in its impulses and full of aloe? Who can tell if that mind, when the touchstone is applied to it, will not be found of a mean and vulgar character? Come, she said. "This is doubting and hesitating too much. To the proof." She looked at the timepiece. "It is now 7 o'clock," she said. "He must have arrived. It is the hour for signing his papers." With a feverish impatience, she rose and walked towards a mirror, in which he smiled with a resolute smile of devotedness. She touched the spring and drew out the handle of the bell. Then, as if exhausted beforehand by the struggle she had just undergone, she threw herself on her knees, in utter abandonment before a large couch, in which she buried her face in her trembling hands. 10 minutes afterward she heard the spring of the door sound. The door moved upon invisible hinges, and Fouquet appeared. He looked pale, and seemed bowed down by the weight of some bitter reflection. He did not hurry, but simply came at the summons. The preoccupation of his mind must indeed have been very great, that a man so devoted to pleasure, for whom indeed pleasure meant everything, should obey such a summons so listlessly. The previous night, in fact, fertile in melancholy ideas, had sharpened his features, generally so noble in their indifference of expression, and had traced dark lines of anxiety around his eyes. Handsome and noble he still was, and the melancholy expression of his mouth, a rare expression with men, gave a new character to his features, by which his youth seemed to be renewed. Dressed in black, the lace in front of his chest much disarranged by his feverishly restless hand, the looks of the superintendent, full of dreamy reflection, were fixed upon the threshold of the room which he had so frequently approached in search of expected happiness. This gloomy gentleness of manner, this smiling sadness of expression, which had replaced his former excessive joy, produced an indescribable effect upon Madame de Bellier, who was regarding him at a distance. A woman's eye can read the face of the man she loves, its every feeling of pride, its every expression of suffering. It might almost be said that heaven has graciously granted to women, on account of their very weakness, more than it has accorded to other creatures. They can conceal their own feelings from a man, but from them no man can conceal his. The marquise divined in a single glance the whole weight of the unhappiness of the superintendent. She divined a night passed without sleep, a day passed in deceptions. From that moment she was firm in her own strength, and she felt that she loved Fouquet beyond everything else. She arose and approached him, saying, "You wrote to me this morning to say you were beginning to forget me, and that I, whom you had not seen lately, had no doubt ceased to think of you. I have come to undeceive you, monsieur, and the more completely so, because there is one thing I can read in your eyes." "What is that, madam?" said Fouquet, astonished. "That you have never loved me so much as at this moment. In the same manner you can read, in my present step towards you, that I have not forgotten you." "Oh, madam," said Fouquet, whose face was for a moment lighted up by a sudden gleam of joy, "you are indeed an angel, and no man can suspect you. All he can do is to humble himself before you and entreat forgiveness." "Your forgiveness is granted, then," said the marquise. Fouquet was about to throw himself upon his knees. "No, no," she said, "sit here by my side. Ah, that is an evil thought which has just crossed your mind. How do you detect it, madam?" "By the smile that has just marred the expression of your countenance. Be candid, and tell me what your thought was. No secrets between friends. Tell me, then, madam, why have you been so harsh these 3 or 4 months past?" "Yes. Did you not forbid me to visit you?" Fouquet started, for these words recalled all the anxieties connected with his office of superintendent. He who, for the last few minutes, had indulged in all the wild aspirations of the lover. "I unhappy," he said, endeavoring to smile. "Indeed, marquise, you will almost make me believe I am so, judging from your own sadness. Are your beautiful eyes raised upon me merely in pity? I was looking for another expression from them. It is not I who am sad, monsieur. Look in the mirror. There, it is yourself. It is true I am somewhat pale, marquise, but it is from overwork. The king yesterday required supply of money from me." "Yes, for millions. I am aware of it." "You understand, marquise, that I have been obliged to procure it, then to get it counted, afterwards registered. Altogether a long affair. Since Monsieur de Mazarin's death, financial affairs occasion some little fatigue and embarrassment. My administration is somewhat overtaxed, and this is the reason why I have not slept during the past night. It would indeed be strange, Marquise, replied Fouquet, cheerfully, if a superintendent of finances were not to have a poultry for millions in his coffers. Yes, yes, I believe you either have or will have them. It is not very long since you were required to furnish 2 millions. On the contrary, to me it seems almost an age, but do not let us talk of money matters any longer. I am at a loss to compass your meaning, said the superintendent, whose eyes began to express an anxious curiosity. Tell me, monsieur, is the office of superintendent a permanent position? You surprise me, Marchioness, for you speak as if you had some motive or interest in putting the question. My reason is simple enough. I am desirous of placing some money in your hands, and naturally I wish to know if you are certain of your post. Really, Marquise, I am at a loss what to reply. I cannot conceive your meaning. Seriously, then, DM Fouquet, funds which somewhat embarrass me. I am tired of investing my money in land, and am anxious to entrust it to some friend who will turn it to account. Surely it does not press, said M. Fouquet. On the contrary, it is very pressing. Very well, we will talk of that by and by. By and by will not do, for my money is there, returned the Marquise, pointing out the coffer to the superintendent and showing him, as he opened it, the bundles of notes and heaps of gold. Fouquet, who had risen from his seat at the same moment as Madame de Bellier, remained for a moment plunged in thought. Then suddenly starting back, he turned pale and sank down in his chair, concealing his face in his hands. Madame, madame, he murmured, what opinion can you have of me when you make me such an offer? Of you, returned the Marquise. Tell me, rather, what you yourself think of the step I have taken. You bring me this money for myself, and you bring it because you know me to be embarrassed. Nay, do not deny it, for I am sure of it. Can I not read your heart? If you know my heart, then can you not see that it is my heart I offer you? I have guessed rightly, then, exclaimed Fouquet. In truth, madam, I have never yet given you the right to insult me in this manner. Insult you, she said, turning pale. What singular delicacy of feeling! You tell me you love me. In the name of that affection, you wish me to sacrifice my reputation and my honor. Yet, when I offer you money which is my own, you refuse me. Madam, you are at liberty to preserve what you term your reputation and your honor. Permit me to preserve mine. Leave me to my ruin. Leave me to sink beneath the weight of the hatreds which surround me, beneath the faults I have committed, beneath the load even of my remorse. But, for heaven's sake, madam, do not overwhelm me with this last infliction. A short time since, M. Fouquet, you were wanting in judgment. Now you are wanting in feeling. Fouquet pressed his clenched hand upon his breast, heaving with emotion, saying, Overwhelm me, madam, for I have nothing to reply. I offered you my friendship, M. Fouquet. Yes, madam, and you limited yourself to that. And what I am now doing is the act of a friend. No doubt it is. And you reject this mark of my friendship. I do reject it. Monsieur Fouquet, look at me, said the Marquise, with glistening eyes. I now offer you my love. Oh, madam, exclaimed Fouquet, I have loved you for a long while past. Women, like men, have a false delicacy at times. For a long time past I have loved you, but would not confess it. Well, then, you have implored this love on your knees, and I have refused you. I was blind, as you were a little while since, but as it was my love that you sought, it is my love I now offer you. Oh, madam, you overwhelm me beneath a load of happiness. Will you be happy, then, if I'm yours entirely? It will be the supremest happiness for me. Take me, then, if, however, for your sake I sacrifice a prejudice, do you, for mine, sacrifice a scruple. Do not tempt me. Do not refuse me. Think seriously of what you are proposing. Fouquet, but one word. Let it be no, And I opened this door, and she pointed to the door which led into the streets. And you will never see me again. Let that word be yes, and I am yours entirely. Elsie, Elsie, but this coffer contains my dowry. It is your ruin, exclaimed Fouquet, turning over the gold and papers. There must be 1,000,000 here. Yes, my jewels, for which I care no longer if you do not love me, and for which, equally, I care no longer if you love me as I love you. This is too much, exclaimed Fouquet. I yield, even were it only to consecrate so much devotion. I accept the dowry. And take the woman with it, said the Marquise, throwing herself into his arms. Chapter 104. Le Terrain de Dieu. During the progress of these events, Buckingham and De Wardes traveled in excellent companionship and made the journey from Paris to Calais in undisturbed harmony together. Buckingham had hurried his departure, so that the greater part of his adieus were very hastily made. His visit to Monsieur and Madame, to the young Queen, and to the Queen Dowager had been paid collectively, a precaution on the part of the Queen Mother which saved him the distress of any private conversation with Monsieur, and also the danger of seeing Madame again. The carriages containing the luggage had already been sent on beforehand, and in the evening he set off in his traveling carriage with his attendants. De Wardes, irritated at finding himself dragged away in so abrupt a manner by this Englishman, had sought in his subtle mind for some means of escaping from his fetters, but no one having rendered him any assistance in this respect, he was absolutely obliged, therefore, to submit to the burden of his own evil thoughts and caustic spirit. Such of his friends in whom he had been able to confide had, in their character of wits, rallied him upon the Duke's superiority. Others, less brilliant, but more sensible, had reminded him of the King's orders prohibiting dueling. Others, again, and in a larger number, who, in virtue of charity or national vanity, might have rendered him assistance, did not care to run the risk of incurring disgrace, and would, at the best, have informed the ministers of a departure which might end in a massacre on a small scale. The result was that, after having fully deliberated upon the matter, De Wardes packed up his luggage, took a couple of horses, and, followed only by one servant, made his way towards a barrier, where Buckingham's carriage was to await him. The Duke received his adversary as he would have done an intimate acquaintance, made room beside him on the same seat with himself, offered him refreshments, and spread over his knees the sable cloak that had been thrown on the front seat. They then conversed of the court, without alluding to Madame, of Monsieur, without speaking of domestic affairs, of the King, without speaking of his brother's wife, of the Queen Mother, without alluding to her daughter-in-law, of the King of England, without alluding to his sister-in-law, of the state of the affections of either of the travelers, without pronouncing any name that might be dangerous. In this way the journey, which was performed by short stages, was most agreeable, and Buckingham, almost a Frenchman from wit and education, was delighted at having so admirably selected his traveling companion. Elegant repasts were served, of which they partook but lightly. Trials of horses made in the beautiful meadows that skirted the road, coursing indulged in, for Buckingham had his greyhounds with him, and in such ways did they pass away the pleasant time. The Duke somewhat resembled the beautiful river Seine, which folds France 1,000 times in its loving embrace, before deciding upon joining its waters with the ocean. In quitting France, it was a recently adopted daughter he had brought to Paris whom he chiefly regretted. His every thought was a remembrance of her, his every memory a regret. Therefore, whenever, now and then, despite his command over himself, he was lost in thought, De Wardes left him entirely to his musings. This delicacy might have touched Buckingham and changed his feelings towards De Wardes, if the latter, while preserving silence, had shown a glance less full of malice, and a smile less false. Instinctive dislikes, however, are relentless. Nothing appeases them. A few ashes may sometimes, apparently, extinguish them, but beneath those ashes the smothered embers rage more furiously. Having exhausted every means of amusement the route offered, they arrived, as we have said, at Calais towards the end of the 6th day. The Duke's attendants, since the previous evening, had traveled in advance, and now chartered boat, for the purpose of joining the yacht, which had been tacking about in sight, or bore broadside on, whenever it felt its white wings wearied, within cannon shot of the jetty. The boat was destined for the transport of the Duke's equipages from the shore to the yacht. The horses had been embarked, having been hoisted from a boat upon the deck in baskets expressly made for the purpose, and wadded in such a manner that their limbs, even in the most violent fits of terror or impatience, were always protected by the soft support which the sides afforded, and their coats not even turned. 8 of these baskets, placed side by side, filled the ship's hold. It is well known that in short voyages horses refuse to eat, but remain trembling all the while, with the best of food before them, such as they would have greatly coveted on land. By degrees, the Duke's entire equipage was transported on board the yacht. He was then informed that everything was in readiness, and that they only waited for him whenever he would be disposed to embark with a French gentleman, for no one could possibly imagine that the French gentleman would have any other accounts to settle with his grace than those of friendship. Buckingham desired the captain to be told to hold himself in readiness, but that, as the sea was beautiful, and as the day promised a splendid sunset, he did not intend to go on board until nightfall, and would avail himself of the evening to enjoy a walk on the strand. He added also that, finding himself in such excellent company, he had not the least desire to hasten his embarkation. As he said this, he pointed out to those who surrounded him the magnificent spectacle which the sky presented, of deepest azure in the horizon, the amphitheater of fleecy clouds ascending from the sun's disk to the zenith, assuming the appearance of a range of snowy mountains, whose summits were heaped one upon another. The dome of clouds was tinged at its base with, as it were, the foam of rubies, fading away into opal and pearly tints, in proportion as the gaze was carried from base to summit. The sea was gilded with the same reflection, and upon the crest of every sparkling wave danced a point of light, like a diamond by lamplight. The mildness of the evening, the sea breezes, so dear to contemplative minds, setting in from the east and blowing in delicious gusts. Then, in the distance, the black outline of the yacht with its rigging traced upon the empurpled background of the sky, while, dotting the horizon, might be seen, here and there, vessels with their trim sails, like the wings of a seagull about to plunge. Such a spectacle indeed well merited admiration. A crowd of curious idlers followed the richly dressed attendants, amongst whom they mistook the steward and the secretary for the master and his friend. As for Buckingham, who was dressed very simply, in a grey satin vest and doublet of violet-coloured velvet, wearing his hat thrust over his eyes, and without orders or embroidery, he was taken no more notice of than De Wardes, who was in black, like an attorney. The Duke's attendants had received directions to have a boat in readiness at the jetty head, and to watch the embarkation of their master, without approaching him until either he or his friend should summon them. Whatever may happen, he had added, laying a stress upon these words, so that they might not be misunderstood. Having walked a few paces upon the strand, Buckingham said to De Wardes, "I think it is now time to take leave of each other. The tide, you perceive, is rising. 10 minutes hence it will have soaked the sands where we are now walking in such a manner that we shall not be able to keep our footing. I await your orders, my lord, but, you mean, we are still upon soil which is part of the king's territory." "Exactly. Well, do you see yonder kind of little island surrounded by a circle of water? The pool is increasing every minute, and the isle is gradually disappearing. This island, indeed, belongs to heaven, for it is situated between 2 seas, and is not shown on the king's charts. Do you observe it?" "Yes, but we can hardly reach it now without getting our feet wet." "Yes, but observe that it forms an eminence tolerably high, and that the tide rises on every side, leaving the top free. We shall be admirably placed upon that little theatre. What do you think of it?" "I shall be perfectly happy wherever I may have the honour of crossing my sword with your lordships." "Very well. Then, I am distressed to be the cause of your wetting your feet, M. De Wardes, but it is most essential you should be able to say to the king, 'Sire, I did not fight upon your majesty's territory.' Perhaps the distinction is somewhat subtle, but, since Port Royal, your nation delights in subtleties of expression. Do not let us complain of this, however, for it makes your wit very brilliant, and of a style peculiarly your own. If you do not object, we will hurry ourselves, for the sea, I perceive, is rising fast, and night is setting in. My reason for not walking faster was that I did not wish to precede your grace. Are you still on dry land, my lord? Yes, at present I am. Look yonder. My servants are afraid we shall be drowned, and have converted the boat into a cruiser. Do you remark how curiously it dances upon the crest of the waves? But, as it makes me feel seasick, would you permit me to turn my back towards them? You will observe, my lord, that in turning your back to them, you will have the sun full in your face. Oh, its rays are very feeble at this hour, and it will soon disappear. Do not be uneasy on that score. As you please, my lord. It was out of consideration for your lordship that I made the remark. I'm aware of that, M. de Wardes, and I fully appreciate your kindness. Shall we take off our doublets? As you please, my lord. Do not hesitate to tell me, M. de Wardes, if you do not feel comfortable upon the wet sand, or if you think yourself a little too close to the French territory. We could fight in England, or even upon my yacht. We are exceedingly well placed here, my lord. Only I have the honor to remark that, as the sea is rising fast, we have hardly time. Buckingham made a sign of assent, took off his doublet and threw it on the ground, a proceeding which the Wardes imitated. Both their bodies, which seemed like phantoms to those who were looking at them from the shore, were thrown strongly into relief by a dark red violet-colored shadow with which the sky became overspread. Upon my word, your grace, said the Wardes, we shall hardly have time to begin. Do you not perceive how our feet are sinking into the sand? I have sunk up to the ankles, said Buckingham, without reckoning that the water is even now breaking in upon us. It has already reached me. As soon as you please, therefore, your grace, said de Wardes, who drew his sword, a movement imitated by the Duke. M. de Wardes, said Buckingham, one final word. I am about to fight you because I do not like you, because you have wounded me in ridiculing a certain devotion or regard I have entertained, and one which I acknowledge that, at this moment, I still retain, and for which I would very willingly die. You are a bad and heartless man, M. de Wardes, and I will do my very utmost to take your life, for I feel assured that, if you survive this engagement, you will, in the future, work great mischief towards my friends. That is all I have to remark, M. de Wardes, concluded Buckingham, as he saluted him. And I, my lord, have only this to reply to you. I have not disliked you hitherto, but, since you give me such a character, I hate you, and will do all I possibly can to kill you. And de Wardes saluted Buckingham. Their swords crossed at the same moment, like two flashes of lightning on a dark night. The swords seemed to seek each other, guessed their position, and met. Both were practiced swordsmen, and the earlier passes were without any result. The night was fast closing in, and it was so dark that they attacked and defended themselves almost instinctively. Suddenly de Wardes felt his sword arrested. He had just touched Buckingham's shoulder. The Duke's sword sunk as his arm was lowered. You are wounded, my lord, said de Wardes, drawing back a step or two. Yes, monsieur, but only slightly. Yet you quitted your gowd. Only from a first effect of the cold steel, but I have recovered. Let us go on, if you please. And disengaging his sword with a sinister clashing of the blade, the Duke wounded the Marquis in the breast. A hit, he said. No, cried de Wardes, not moving from his place. I beg your pardon, but observing that your shirt was stained, said Buckingham. Well, said de Wardes furiously, it is now your turn. And with a terrible lunge, he pierced Buckingham's arm, the sword passing between the two bones. Buckingham, feeling his right arm paralyzed, stretched out his left, seized his sword, which was about falling from his nerveless grasp, and before de Wardes could resume his guard, he thrust him through the breast. De Wardes tottered. His knees gave way beneath him, and leaving his sword still fixed in the Duke's arm, he fell into the water, which was soon crimson with a more genuine reflection than that which it had borrowed from the clouds. De Wardes was not dead. He felt the terrible danger that menaced him, for the sea rose fast. The Duke, too, perceived the danger. With an effort and an exclamation of pain, he tore out the blade which remained in his arm, and turning towards de Wardes said, Are you dead, Marquis? "No," replied De Wardes, in a voice choked by the blood which rushed from his lungs to his throat, but very near it. "Well, what is to be done? Can you walk?" said Buckingham, supporting him on his knee. "Impossible," he replied. Then falling down again, said, "Call to your people, or I shall be drowned. Hullo, boat there! Quick, quick!" The boat flew over the waves, but the sea rose faster than the boat could approach. Buckingham saw that De Wardes was on the point of being again covered by a wave. He passed his left arm, safe and unwounded, round his body and raised him up. The wave ascended to his waist but did not move him. The Duke immediately began to carry his late antagonist towards the shore. He had hardly gone 10 paces, when a second wave, rushing onwards higher, more furious and menacing than the former, struck him at the height of his chest, threw him over and buried him beneath the water. At the reflux, however, the Duke and De Wardes were discovered lying on the strand. De Wardes had fainted. At this moment 4 of the Duke's sailors, who comprehended the danger, threw themselves into the sea, and in a moment were close beside him. Their terror was extreme when they observed how their master became covered with blood, in proportion as the water with which it was impregnated flowed towards his knees and feet. They wished to carry him. "No, no," exclaimed the Duke, "take the Marquis on shore first." "Death to the Frenchman," cried the English sullenly. "Wretched knaves!" exclaimed the Duke, drawing himself up with a haughty gesture, which sprinkled them with blood. "Obey directly. De Wardes on shore. De Wardes' safety to be looked to first, or I will have you all hanged." The boat had by this time reached them. The secretary and steward leaped into the sea and approached the Marquis, who no longer showed any sign of life. "I commit him to your care, as you value your lives," said the Duke. "Take De Wardes on shore." They took him in their arms and carried him to the dry sand, where the tide never rose so high. A few idlers and 5 or 6 fishermen had gathered on the shore, attracted by the strange spectacle of 2 men fighting with the water up to their knees. The fishermen, observing a group of men approaching carrying a wounded man, entered the sea until the water was up to their waists. The English transferred the wounded man to them. At the very moment the latter began to open his eyes again. The salt water and the fine sand had got into his wounds and caused him the acutest pain. The Duke's secretary drew out a purse filled with gold from his pocket and handed it to the one among those present who appeared of most importance, saying, "For my master, His Grace the Duke of Buckingham, in order that every possible care may be taken of the Marquis de Wardes."